I picked up the backpack I had brought from home this morning and said goodbye to Sandeep. I was on my way to Varanasi. There was no particular reason why I had chosen this destination, except that I thought the great tantrics lived in Varanasi, and I'd be able to find a guru there. I first caught a train to Delhi as my connection to Varanasi was from there. In Delhi, I checked into a hotel for the night as my train was due to leave early the next morning. From my room, I called Canada and spoke to my mother and PB one more time. They both were unsuspecting, of course. When I reached Varanasi, I checked into a lodge and went straight to bed. The next morning, I went to a cyber cafe. In addition to the individual emails I sent out to a handful of people, I sent a common note to almost everyone in my contact list. The mail read, "Dear Alls, ever since I can recall, I have ached to dedicate my life to a higher cause, one different from just building material wealth. With that in mind, I have always wanted to go on a spiritual quest, a quest for the inner self. The time to pursue my mission has come, and I must start to give it some shape. My quest involves understanding and verifying the truth firsthand, the truth of self-realization, that is. Will I be successful? I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I will still go ahead with my plan. Is this what I really want to do? I am only so sure. Is it worth causing my loved ones the pain of separation? To be honest, I don't have an answer to this question. Each one of us is unique and born with a different purpose. The ultimate goal may well be the same. The purpose generally is. The moment has arrived that I must embark on the spiritual journey of my life. For the last 18 years, I have waited for this moment every single day. Please take care of yourself and each other, and know that it's only my physical presence that is finding its nest someplace else, all else remains unchanged. From this moment on and for an indefinite period, I shall not be contactable using any mediums of the 21st century. I am leaving my phone behind. All my email accounts will cease to exist, and I do not have a permanent address. Any reply to this email will bounce too. I am deeply grateful to you all for the extraordinary care, love and affection you have given me over the years. And I, from the core of my heart, beg for your forgiveness, for there must have been times when I hurt you with my thoughts, words or actions. If you forgive me, it'll help me travel light. I most reverently bow to the divine in you. Amit. Fatigued and dehydrated after a whole day roaming around the Ghats, I couldn't sleep. There was nothing more to think of where the past was concerned. I just waited for the night to pass. Eventually I got up at 5 a.m, had a long bath and went to the breakfast area. It was closed. I made several trips to the restaurant over the next 2 hours, but the result was the same. Somewhat flustered, I went to the reception where I found the employees sleeping. Some were on the floor while others slept on the couch. It was 9 a.m. by the time they started serving breakfast. The sun was shining bright and the mercury was already on the rise. My vision of starting my day really early was a dream as unreal as the last 24 hours. Manish didn't turn up until about 10. Finally, we left the guest house. We went to a small ashram by the river called Srimath. An old man, slightly hunched, came out and asked me where I was from and what I wanted. I told him I was in search of a guru who could guide me on the spiritual path. He asked me to follow him, telling Manish to wait outside. I was taken into a room where 2 men were sitting. One of them was going through ledgers and accounts, the other, wearing white robes, sat watching. I bowed before the man in white. He began asking me questions like why I wanted to take sannyasa and whether my parents knew about it. He wanted to know where they were based, what they did, how many siblings I had, if I had a job or a business and why had I left it, what else I was after. There were other questions as well, but I can't recall them now. After grilling me for about 10 minutes, he said, "Guruji is at the Kumbh Mela in Haridwar these days." From the outset, I hadn't sensed even an ounce of divinity in this man, but had thought that my faulty vision and shortcomings were causing me to misjudge him. The other man asked me a few more questions about my educational background, and then said he was happy to see someone like me, whatever that meant. He told me I should really be in Haridwar since all the saints were gathered there. I wasn't keen on going to Haridwar or anywhere else for that matter. I was certain that God had brought me to Varanasi for a reason. Just then a short, fat man, also wearing white robes, entered the room. He sat on a couch and let out a loud belch. I didn't feel like bowing down before him, even though my culture and tradition required me to pay obeisance to someone in robes, as they are a symbol of the Dharma. I showed my discomfort at his mannerisms by not looking at him. "Where have you come from?" he said. "Jai Delhi. Are the trains on time these days? Mine was late by 4 hours. These rascals can never be on time, they were even born late. And he burped again. I ate a bit too much. Chotu, oh Chotu, he called out to someone. A minute passed. Oh Chotu, he raised his volume significantly. Jai Babaji, a young boy appeared. Why don't you ever answer the first time around? Even God appears faster than you do. Make 4 cups of tea. Not for me, thanks, I don't take tea. I said, we can get milk for you. Thank you very much, but I'm fine, I just had my breakfast. Make 3 cups then, he said to Chotu. So you've had your breakfast, where are you staying? I've already been through this, I said. I wasn't going to waste any more time here. I offered my respects to the men, left a 100-rupee note and got out of there as fast I could. Manish was waiting for me outside. I told him what a disaster the place had been. He laughed, I laughed too. Then he suggested another place nearby I could explore. It turned out to be an old building and I was immediately attracted to it. Although all the buildings in this area were old, this one was particularly dilapidated. Looking at it, I was convinced I would meet a Siddha here, some great yogi who sat behind its walls hidden from public view. The main door was ajar. I knocked but there was no response. Manish pushed open the door and we entered a courtyard. There was a giant peepal tree in the center. Its massive spread obscured a portion of the sky above. Leaves, soft and green, lay strewn on the ground along with dry brown ones. The walls were peeling. One could see the earlier coat of paint below the existing whitewash. There was a small washroom near the entrance. I could see the floor was still wet, as if someone had just taken a bath. The tap was dripping and water was collecting in an old aluminum bucket. A mug of water sat close by, its handle broken. Nearby I saw a room with the door ajar. It had 3 single beds while an old Naga sadhu lay on a rug spread on the floor. He looked as weary as his surroundings and was quite old, perhaps 80. I realized he was gasping for breath. He kept pointing at his mouth and chest to convey he was unable to breathe. I had been asthmatic all my life, so I knew what it was like to struggle for breath. I told Manish that we should take the sadhu to the hospital and that I would pay for his treatment. Manish shook his head, saying he had been in the hospital until last week. He also informed me that there were other sadhus who lived there and they would be back in the evening. This man was not alone. How do you know? I asked Manish. I live around here, sir. I know this ghat and this barbar too. You think anyone would leave this place unoccupied and in this prime location? The other beds did look like they were freshly done, and I could see the bathroom had been used. I felt the truth of Manish's words. The sadhu was not alone, but I felt sorry for the old sadhu. Why isn't he taking any medication? He has no money for medication, and the government hospital has no facilities to help him. Let's take him to a private hospital. I'll pay. And what if he dies on the way? The police will say you killed him because you wanted the ashram. We'll get into trouble with the law. Strangely, though cruelly, he made sense to me. When we left the building, I told Manish I needed to take a breather. I sat down on the stairs outside. I could not erase the sight of the old sadhu from my mind. Even my life could end in a similar way, and I understood that I needed to be mentally prepared for this possibility. How was I any different from the gasping sadhu? He had renounced his past, and so had I. Questions flooded my mind. No one around, young or old, renunciant or householder, seemed to have seen God. What if there was no God? What if I had no maker but had just evolved over time along with other species? Perhaps my search for the divine would prove futile, and I would end up like that sadhu, wasted and abandoned. How can a sadhu be dying like that? I asked Manish. They are not real sadhus, sir. They smoke pot all day. Some are even fugitives from justice. Despite this reassurance from Manish, I was unable to forget the old sadhu's face for months. We went to another ghat after that. There Manish took me to a temporary structure made from yellow tarpaulin. The door was open and I could see a Naga sadhu sitting on his knees, stark naked. A disciple stood near him. Wanting to meet the sadhu, I went closer to the entrance, but the disciple stood up and asked me to keep away. Nevertheless, I peeped in. There was a bed on one side, some 18 inches high, with a large lion skin spread on it. Numerous drums of food and other provisions were crammed into the hut, and it was a messy little place. I handed the disciple a 50-rupee note. The man smiled. You want to have Babaji's darshan. He knows everything. Before you even got here he knew all about you, he said enthusiastically. Upon seeing that Manish was a local, he threw him a contemptuous glance. I made to enter the tent. Suddenly the Baba began shouting excitedly. The disciple hurriedly told me that since the ascetic had allowed me a glimpse of him, he wanted to be left alone. I was asked to leave. I pulled out 100 rupee note, which the attendant took promptly. Babaji, he's your devotee, he wants your blessings. He turned to look at the holy man and showed him the money. Can I come in now? I asked. No, that's not allowed. I pulled out another 100 rupee note, and he asked me to enter. I left that very moment. Till now I had been open to the possibility that the sadhu was an evolved being who was trying to keep me away as he didn't want to meet people. But when more money finally opened the door, I knew this was not my destination. For me, both men were naked. One had bared his body and the other had sold his soul. I was reminded of a couplet by Kabir. Guru Jaka Antara, Kila Hijarchand, Antarand Theliai, Donu Koop Parent. The Guru is blind and so is the disciple. The blind is leading the blind and both will end up in the well. I continued to wander around with Manish. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew what I was searching for. Sometime later, a building caught my eye and I was irresistibly drawn to it. From where we were standing, I could only see the back of the structure. I told Manish I wanted to go there. He took me up the flight of stairs to the road above the ghat and led me through another maze of streets until we arrived at the entrance to that building. There was a large iron door with grills. Nestling within it was a smaller wicket gate. We knocked on this gate, but no one opened it, even though we could hear voices within. We waited and then knocked again. Finally, Manish put his hand through the grill and unbolted the door from the inside. We bent over to enter and found ourselves in a courtyard. To our right was a room. Inside, 4 young men were chatting loudly. Across the courtyard was a small temple within which sat an older man. Seeing us, he came out. "Where are you from?" he asked, barely managing to open his mouth as it was full of pan. Here we go again. Another interrogation, I thought. After fielding a few questions, I said, "I want to meet Babaji." No one had told me that there was someone called Babaji who lived here, but somehow I knew, call it intuition or plain hope. Rather than answering my question, the man pointed to Manish and said, "Who is this lad?" He scanned Manish from head to toe. I had seen men leering at women, but this was the first time I saw a man's gaze run over another man in this way. His eyes, however, were full of contempt. "He's my guide, I want to meet Babaji," I repeated. The young men, they must have been in their late teens or early 20s, gathered around us. The man, who I discovered was called Misraji, twitched his eyebrows, giving an instruction to the others. 2 of them started calling out, "Oh, Dinesh Muniji, oh Babaji. Babaji, Dinesh Muniji." They called out over and over again until a door opened and a man stepped into the courtyard. Dinesh Muni was a short, dark man with a sparse beard. His hair, jet black and a little curly, was tied behind his head. He looked at me with such disdain that I gave myself a hasty once-over to see if I was dressed all right. "He's the Baba," said the men in unison. I looked at Misraji and he nodded. "What do you want?" He wagged his head to put emphasis on his question. "Not you, I want to meet Babaji," I said. I got everyone's attention now because they thought I already knew who the bona fide Baba was since I had refused to accept Dinesh Muni's claim. My conclusion, however, was based on my assessment of his energy and attitude. It was not hard to see that he was not a particularly evolved being. He projected no radiance, his speech had no depth. His voice cut through my thoughts as he told me that Babaji wasn't there. Scolding the boys for disturbing him, he stormed off. I sat down with Misraji to find out more about Babaji. He explained that Babaji spent most of his time at another ashram about 80 km from Varanasi. I asked him for the address, but he sounded reluctant to give it to me. Perhaps he just wanted me to plead. I insisted. Finally, he gave me a vague idea, saying it was in a village called Kasvar. "Just get there and ask around. They will guide you," he said. He took pains, however, to tell me the things I had to buy for Baba. I was not to go empty-handed, but take some items as an offering. He dictated a list that included 2 different types of sweets, dry fruits, a special pack of pan, the day's newspaper, flowers and anything else I wanted to offer him. I was ready to go and meet Baba the very next day. Manish said he wanted Baba's darshan as well. I agreed. He had been with me for the last 2 days and deserved this opportunity as much as anyone else. At 6 a.m, I shook awake the people at the reception so they could unlock the main door for me. Manish was waiting for me outside. No shops, absolutely none at all, were open, so I couldn't get any of the items I was meant to buy. We asked an autorickshaw driver if he would take us there, all the way. And back, I added. That's too far, no I can't, it will be expensive, tell me how much, maybe I can pay. No, it will cost a lot of money. Do you want to go or not? Yes, I do. How much? But it's too far. I was beginning to lose my patience. I'm asking you the last time, if you tell me the price I can decide, and back too. Yes, I just have to be there for an hour or two, and we'll be back after. How many people? Just the two of us. Are you certain you're coming back today? I looked at Manish. What's wrong with him? It was early in the morning and I was on an empty stomach. I was going to meet my guru, and a simple autorickshaw driver had managed to ruin my joyous mood and dampen my enthusiasm in a matter of moments. Such is the influence petty events can have on one at times. I looked around to see if there was any other autorickshaw available. Just then he said, I'll charge Rs 600. I was in no mood to bargain. I nodded and hopped into the autorickshaw. Manish got in beside me. The autorickshaw proceeded slowly, and it was past 9:30 a.m. when we reached the village. Soon we were parked outside my destination, a school building. It looked reasonably large for that small village. I was surprised to see some police constables manning the entrance. It turned out that the school was an examination centre for the B.Ed exams, and the police were there to prevent cheating. Apparently, cheating was rampant. The teachers promoted it by providing the students slips of paper with the answers written on them. Sometimes they even wrote answers on the blackboard, yet I couldn't quite understand why the constables were so heavily armed. They were carrying rifles. To confront whom? Those who brought the slips of paper. Next to the large school building was a smaller building. I was told that this was an English medium school that taught students till class 8. The children were singing their morning prayer, a classical eulogy of Ma Saraswati in melodious voices. Vina Vardini Vardas. Vardavina Vardini Vardas. Priya Swatantra Rov Umrit Mantra Nav Bharat Main Bardavada. Vardavina Vardini Varda. O Goddess, bless us with free thought, with divine wisdom. Fill this nation with the nectar of knowledge. I told a policeman that I was here to see Babaji. He directed me to a small house behind the school. I walked up to the house and paused at the door, which was ajar. An ascetic sat singing the raga alap as if in some divine ecstasy. I stood there, completely mesmerized. I had never seen an ascetic like him. Years of austerities had tanned his skin. His dark face contrasted with his pure white beard and moustache, and I felt like I was looking at a beautiful solar eclipse. His long, white, matted hair was tied in an unusual knot on top of his head. He had an unusually large forehead like Tapasvins normally have. He was also pot-bellied, as if he always practiced kumpaka, yogic retention of breath, like great yogis of yore. He sat cross-legged with the detachment of a jivanmukta, a cloth covering his thighs. He stopped singing and looked at me. His small but still eyes had a hypnotic pull. They instilled fear and awe at the same time. The first glance he threw at me didn't just see me but saw through me, it imprisoned me. I surrendered then and there. The authority in his look said he owned the place. Actually, he looked as if he owned the universe and everything in it. I knew I had met a Siddha. As I did a full-length prostration before him, Manish came up behind me. Who is he? Baba asked. He's my guide, Baba. I turned to Manish and said, can you please wait near the autorickshaw? I sensed Baba didn't like him there. Are you doing some research? Baba asked me after a few introductory questions. No, Baba, I want to be initiated into sannyasa. Why do you want to take sannyasa? I have done many sadhanas. I've been experimenting and trying real hard at that for nearly 20 years, but I haven't been able to get to that ultimate state the scriptures talk about. What sadhanas have you done? I named some. Are you a Brahmin? Jai Baba, I'm a Saraswat Brahmin of the Gautam Gotra. I told him my full name too. Then I will teach you. He asked some more questions and told me to stay in his ashram in Varanasi. I'll see you at the ashram in 2 days. I prostrated again and offered him some money. When you have surrendered yourself, what use is this money? He said. Leaving the offering by his feet, I walked out of the cottage feeling blessed and fulfilled, letting go. It was about noon by the time we got back to Varanasi. I checked out of the guest house and said goodbye to Manish, my guide for the last 2 days. Please call on me again, he said sweetly. If you don't like it here, I can help you find another ashram. I thanked him again and headed to Baba's Varanasi ashram as I had been instructed. At the ashram, Dinesh Muni opened a room for me. I walked in and looked around, not that there was much to see. There was no bed and no bedding, just a bare floor and a mouldy cupboard. The room was nice and cool though. I lay down on the floor and stared at the fan. It rotated slowly and creaked as it went round and round. Welcome to self-realization, it seemed to be saying. The hard floor was uncomfortable. I asked Dinesh Muni if it was possible to get a mattress or a sheet. Without bothering to reply, he went upstairs while I waited in the courtyard on the ground floor. After a while, he called out my name from the first floor, and when I looked up, he flung down a thin, filthy rug down. It landed beside me in a cloud of dust, which triggered off a bout of coughing. Gasping for breath, I reached out for my inhaler and took a double dose. As I waited for the coughing to subside, I wondered at Dinesh Muni's behavior towards me. It didn't occur to me until much later that he was after money. Had I known this at the time, I would have given him some money. It would have made my life easier and his too. To my surprise, I also learned that even though he looked and acted every bit unlettered, he was actually doing a PhD at Benares Hindu University. It only reaffirmed my faith that bookish knowledge could take one only so far. Here he was, doing a doctorate in Sanskrit but clueless about humanity or humanism, especially considering that the word Sanskrit means one who is cultured. There were 4 other residents in the ashram and they were full-time students in different colleges. They helped in the ashram chores and in return got free food and accommodation. Later that day I went to the market. Rather than wasting time while I waited for Baba to come, I thought I would buy a book or 2. I picked up some tantric texts, which would come in handy over the next few months I spent with Baba. They would keep me busy during the day and serve as my pillow at night. 4 days went by while I eagerly waited for Baba. I'd been longing to see him since our first meeting. In fact, not a moment went by when I didn't think of him. Meanwhile, I made another trip to the market to buy books and took Pawan, one of the students, along with me. I offered to buy refreshing lassi for both of us. He was shy at first but then had 3 glasses. On our way to the bookshop, Pawan opened up and said his father owned a tea stall back in the village. Being Brahmins, it was his father's dream that Pawan become a Hindu priest. Is this what you want to do though? I asked. Yes, but it's very hard studying and working together, he said dejectedly. By the time I'm done with the ashram chores, I'm so tired I just want to sleep. Have you spoken to Baba about it? I can't speak to Babaji, he might get really mad at me. Really? Yes, actually I'm curious, how did you know about Babaji? I didn't. Life has brought me to him and I'm sure Baba is my guru. I think Babaji may be furious if you call him just Baba. His wish is my command, Pawan. I'll call him whatever he wants. Pawan wasn't entirely wrong because everyone else did call him Babaji. For some reason though, from day one I called him Baba. I felt closer to him by addressing him in this way, but I did so with great love and reverence. At the bookshop I asked Pawan if he wanted to buy a book, but he shook his head. When I insisted I wanted to get something for him, he said he wanted a bottle of Coke. I thought it would be a good idea to get something for everyone in the ashram. We got a large soft drink bottle, sweetened mango drinks and 2 packets of biscuits. The students jumped with joy to see the shopping. Dinesh Muni softened a bit and gulped down the 1-litre bottle of Coke. This treat became a regular feature. Whenever I went to buy books, I would get a couple of bottles of Coke and biscuits for them. I would also get biscuits water for myself. It was sheer joy to be able to drink that cold water. There was a fridge in Dinesh Muni's room, but I never went there and he kept the cold water to himself. Besides, he would drink straight off the bottle, so I wasn't keen on drinking from it. Biscuits and bottled water became my preferred meal because here, they didn't make breakfast till 11 a.m. in the darbas outside. The only breakfast available consisted of puris and samosas, both deep-fried items. I used to get up around 4 a.m., and waiting till mid-morning wasn't a good option, nor was eating puris. Of course, biscuits weren't ideal either, but I had to survive. In the evening, moths and other insects thronged the cooking area. Much to my amazement, the students and Dinesh Muni were perfectly fine with it, not making any attempt to cover the food. Even the wheat flour was left uncovered at night, and you could see scores of dead insects in the flour the next morning. The first time I saw the sight, I was shocked, and didn't think it was prudent to throw away the flour every day just because we didn't cover it at night. but they had other ideas. They would simply sift the flour, throw away the dead creatures and proceed to make the dough. I tried to suggest an alternative method a few times, and tried to cover the flour at other times, but Danish Muni took this as interference on my part, so I stopped. I ate that food like everyone else, accepting it as part of my experience there. There were other aspects of living there that took some getting used to. Slippers were not permitted in the ashram, not even in the washrooms, which were incredibly dirty. Squatting barefoot over the Indian-style toilet was the greatest torture I'd ever put myself through. To add insult to injury, I hadn't used such a seat in over a decade. I felt tired quickly, but this situation, as it turned out, helped me prepare for life in the Himalayan forests. There, I was able to attend the call of nature effortlessly. Within the first few days at the ashram, my feet became extremely dry and cracked. Till now, I had never been barefoot for more than a few minutes. Here, I was barefoot all the time. I washed my feet every couple of hours, but that didn't help. The physical discomforts didn't bother me as much as waiting for Baba did. I was constantly thinking about him. He had said he would be there in a couple of days, but there was no sign of him. I wanted to go and visit him in the village. But everyone dissuaded me. You must wait here because that was Babaji's instruction to you. Finally, I couldn't wait any further and decided that I was going to see Baba at his ashram. The next morning, I put a set of clothes and some toiletries into a small polythene bag and left for Baba's village. I left late so I could buy his favourite sweets, pan and newspaper. It was just past 11 a.m. when I got there. I almost ran from the auto-rickshaw to his cottage, for I couldn't wait to see him. Entering his room, I prostrated before him and placed the offerings by his feet. I thought Baba would be happy to see me again. He, however, spoke to me as if he had no recollection of our earlier meeting and no idea that I had been waiting at the ashram in Varanasi. I was as bewildered as I was disappointed, but shrugged aside my feelings, thinking that this was perhaps Baba's way of testing me. After a little while he said, "All right, let's talk today." He asked me about my education and background. He was delighted to hear that I ran a software company and other businesses, and that I had lived in various countries. But above all, he was particularly pleased to know that I spoke English and that I had received my higher education abroad. Subsequently, he would tell anyone who came to visit that I was an MBA from Australia. I requested Baba to grant me permission to stay back at the ashram and serve him. He didn't respond right away. I sat quietly near him. After a while, a girl entered the room. He told her that I wanted to be his disciple and asked her if she was comfortable with this. She nodded and they spoke to each other in Bhojpuri, the local language, which I couldn't understand. After that, Baba told me I could stay back. I let the auto-rickshaw go. This girl, Nikki, used to look after Baba and cook for him. He only ate food that had been cooked by a Kumari, and no one else was allowed to partake of that food. It was probably linked to his tantric practice. He treated her like his own daughter. I was introduced to the other people living in the ashram. There was Nikki, of course, who used to stay with Baba in his room. Her brother used to come and sleep there because Baba, as a matter of principle, never stayed alone with Nikki. He always made it a point that someone else be there. Then there was Shesh Muni, a disciple who was 2 years older than Baba. Baba's driver, who everyone called Pandi Driver, also lived there. His full name, I was one of the rare few to ask him, was Hari Om Pandi. At the time I arrived, about 10 construction workers had taken up temporary residence on the premises as Baba had commenced the construction of a third building, a degree college for girls. Baba asked me to go and rest in the nearby hut. "Jai Baba," I said at his instruction. These were the words I uttered most often with Baba. No matter how absurd the instruction, if it came from his mouth, I simply said Jai Baba. And I only ever spoke if he wanted a response from me. For the rest of the time I remained silent. I wanted to be a real disciple in every way, giving him all I had, my body, heart, mind and soul, as well as my financial resources. The holy books state that there are only 2 types of conversations that occur between a guru and his disciple. A guru asks and the disciple answers, or a disciple asks and the guru may choose to answer. There is never any debate between a guru and his disciple. There is no room for answering back. This is the Eastern culture, which I respected and valued. The hut Baba had directed me to was crumbling and badly in need of repair, and cobwebs covered the walls. A thin mattress lay in a corner. As soon as I unfolded it, spiders and other insects scurried out. It was full of dust. In fact, it seemed as if it was made from dust. Pandy driver arrived a few minutes later with a water pipe and hosed the place down. I requested him to shake the mattress vigorously to get rid of the dust as I was asthmatic. He obliged, but the mattress remained dusty. I covered my face and gave it another shake. The dust got to me anyway. I took a couple of puffs of the inhaler to recover and sat down to rest. In the afternoon, Baba sent a message for me to have something to eat in Shesh Muni's room. Shesh Muni's room was made with unplastered bricks and had a tin roof. A dirty basket containing potatoes lay in a corner, while old metal and plastic containers had been placed on the shelf that lined the walls. Rats, big and fearless, were jumping freely on these jars and boxes in broad daylight. God knows what was in them, for Shesh Muni only ever ate a specific type of lentil with potatoes. He was a heart patient, so there was absolutely no oil in his meals. There were no spices or chilies either. In fact, there was just no flavor or taste in his food. There was a single bed in the room, which had a couple of bare mattresses. There was no bed sheet. The pillow was truly soiled, as if it had never been washed. A bunch of keys, a few really old pens without caps and some coins lay next to the pillow. An old table fan was making a disturbingly loud racket. One corner was adorned with a more modern item, a gas stove, but it turned out no one was allowed to use it except in an emergency. They cooked food on a kerosene stove instead. I had a vague memory of seeing a stove like that when I was 3 or 4 years old. When you pump it to release the kerosene, it makes a great deal of noise. Then you have to light it. Shesh Muni would later lose a part of his luxuriant white beard while lighting that stove. Unsurprisingly, the brick floor was rather dirty. A couple of days after I arrived, I discovered that Baba was getting his cottage renovated. It had 2 rooms, a washroom, a kitchen and a small lobby. Apparently he was short of funds. Worried about minor expenses, he had decided to compromise on the renovation. I ventured to tell Baba that he had practiced austerities all his life, and there was no longer any need to do so. I suggested getting an air conditioner for his room. When he said he didn't have the money, I told him I would buy one for him. He informed me that the power outages there lasted longer than the hours when there was power, so the air conditioner would be of little use. I offered to buy a power generator. He asked me who would pay for the diesel to run the generator, and I said I could cover it from the monthly stipend my company paid me. Baba liked my offer and gave me the permission to pay for the widgets, fixtures and all. He also asked me to get fancy lights and 2 small chandeliers for the 2 rooms. I wanted to serve my guru in every possible way. Had he asked me to sever my head and put it at his feet, I would have done it without a thought. Baba asked about my savings and the amount of money I had in the bank. I told him the truth. I also explained that I had technically given all my money away when I left. The reason some money remained in my account was that some people had not cashed their checks, probably due to their love and concern for me. The next day, the plan to buy the air conditioner and other items was put into action. Baba sent for a man called Ranjay Pandey. He turned out to be a noble man who would play an important role for me later. Ranjay brought his SUV to pick me up. A couple of other people joined us as Baba wanted them to accompany me. He stated that I was quite naive and the shopkeepers would rip me off. I simply said, "Jai Baba." Baba was quite pleased to see the AC, power generator and fixtures for his cottage, but nothing could be installed until the renovation was complete. Thus he asked me to supervise and speed up the renovation of the cottage. I did so willingly, though it was a challenge. Even while the work was going on, I had to walk barefoot on the floor, which was covered with cement, sand, dust and other construction materials. Although he wasn't living there and the place was under construction, this was his home and no one was allowed to enter with shoes on. I cleaned my feet daily, but it was the same story the next day. My heels cracked really badly and blood would ooze out. Unable to bear the pain, I once visited the construction site with my flip-flops on, but it turned out to be a bad idea as everyone thought I was being arrogant. Nikki complained to Baba, though he didn't say anything to me. I didn't mind the discomforts at the ashram because I was there for my sadhana and saw them as ways to serve my guru. Was my devotion towards Baba so weak that I would crumble at the simple task of handling his construction or walking barefoot? Wasn't I supposed to rise above the slavery of my body? Hadn't I spent the first 30 years of my life mainly looking after my body? A lack of food, or of the absence of respect, was a small price to pay for learning the secrets of sadhana. Anything that pushed me beyond what I was used to enduring would take me to a new level, I thought. But I was desperate to immerse myself in meditation so I could see Mother Divine and experience samadhi. I was looking up to Baba to guide me, to direct me, but it was rather hard to even get a private audience with him because Nikki was always around. She used to study in Baba's school, but since he owned the school, the rules were relaxed for her. Any private time I got with him was the best part of my day. On one of these rare occasions, I asked him, "Baba, I really want to see God. It's possible, right, Baba?" "What isn't possible with penance? Mother Divine is waiting with open arms for her child's loving call." I was moved to tears. I wanted to see Mother Divine. I wanted to play in her lap. "Baba, I'll be eternally grateful if you can share with me any experiences you've had with the Divine." He chuckled and began narrating an incident. I listened with rapt attention. "I used to be big and strong and regularly participated in wrestling competitions. Once, when I was around 19 years old, we were 3 sadhus traveling to a different village to take part in a wrestling competition. On the way, we stopped by the riverside and took out our lunch. From a distance, we saw a tall sadhu coming our way, walking briskly but gracefully. His face glowed. I joked with him saying, "What's the rush, Maharaj? Are you running for alms? Come, I'll feed you." This angered him and he chastised me saying, "You have become a sadhu but you don't possess any of the traits of a sadhu." I teased him again and said, "Really? So you tell me what a sadhu is supposed to be like?" He asked me to follow him if I really wanted to know. I took one of the bicycles and told my companions that I would see them later at the competition venue. The sadhu took me to a cremation ground. There was a small temple there with an idol of the goddess. He had me sit in front of the idol. "Now you will be able to see with your own eyes." He closed the door and it became dark inside. Lighting a lamp, he began to chant a cryptic mantra. After he finished, he said, "I'll wait for you outside." He left, shutting the door behind him. A few seconds later, the idol began to dance. It was a stone idol and seeing it dance made me really scared. I was sweating in fear and if it wasn't a temple, I would have easily wet my loincloth. I stood up but the idol didn't stop dancing. I also began to hear strange sounds, the howling of jackals and dogs, flowing water, thundering clouds, and I was terrified. I sat down again, but the energy continued to become more intense and unbearable. I could not take it anymore and sprang up. Without bowing, I flung the door open. Outside, the Mahatma was waiting. "So, what did you see?" he asked. The arrogant fool that I was, I didn't want to admit that I had been humbled. "I saw nothing," I said. "Get lost, you pig, your face shows you are lying," said the sadhu. Falling at his feet, I asked for his forgiveness and requested him to accept me as his disciple. By lying, however, I had lost him. "I can't teach someone like you, you'd better get out of here," he said. I went to the cremation ground several times after that, but never found him again. I sat in that temple at night, during the day, with the door open with the door closed, but the idol did not dance again, nor did those sounds ever return. Baba became quiet after that. I bowed before him in gratitude for the experience he had shared with me. I wanted to ask questions about sadhana, but I had not the courage to break the sublime silence. "I'm here, Borji." Nikki's arrival brought an end to our conversation. 2 devotees from the village also arrived and started pressing his legs, which was something he really enjoyed. It was now afternoon and he always napped in the afternoons. He signaled to me to leave. Daily, Baba asked me if I was actually serious about taking sannyasa diksha. I became a sadhu because my teacher used to beat me at school and my father used to beat me at home. I ran away at the age of 9. I'm curious as to why you want to renounce. You're educated, healthy, young and good-looking. It doesn't make sense. I smiled at his compliments. "Because I want to see God, Baba. I'm not interested in material life." "That's fine, but I don't believe that your mother is okay with your decision." No one knows where I am presently, but I had always told my mother that I would go away for my sadhana one day. "Guru, I won't initiate you till I speak to your mother." Sometimes he affectionately called me Guru. One morning, I recall it was 31 March, Baba asked me to call my mother. This was not something I wanted to do, but I couldn't refuse him. My mother was in Canada with my brother at the time. I called the house from Baba's phone and Ma picked up. She was overwhelmed to hear my voice. I told her I was all right and that my guru wanted to speak to her. Baba said to her, "Yes, my daughter, he has approached me for sannyasa. Should I make him a Mahatma?" "Babaji," said my mother, "he's been like this since early childhood. Please bless him, so he becomes such a great soul that I may say to the whole world, I'm the mother of a Mahatma." Baba uttered some words of blessing and put the phone down. He was over the moon. I'm happy today that your mother has blessed and approved of your sadhana. Now I'll certainly initiate you on the path of renunciation. This was the last time I spoke to my mother during the course of my sadhana. He began to sing a song in Bhojpuri that I didn't understand, and Nikki started laughing. Some school teachers came into the room and my guru turned to them. Today, I spoke to his mother. Baba related his conversation and then quoted a verse from the Ramcharitmanas. Putravati jubati jag soy, raghupati bakt jasu sat hoy, nataru banj bali bard biyani, ram bimuk satti hit jani. Many mothers give birth to sons, but a real mother is the one whose son devotes his life to a good cause. Otherwise, her going through the labor pain is a waste. A woman who expects welfare from a selfish son is better off being barren. Sarvananda, Swami Sarvananda, he gave me the name right there. I prostrated before him. I'll make you a Siddha, he added. I folded my hands and said, Jai Baba. You already have everything, you just have to travel a little bit. You are born with it. I felt deeply humbled. My date of initiation, however, was postponed a couple of times. Finally, on 11 April, Baba initiated me. My head was shaved and I dropped my old clothes. I was given a set of robes and a loincloth, my secret mantra and the new name, but most of all, I was given the privilege of taking a pledge only a sannyasi was allowed. I hereby renounce the transient material world and enter into the life of a renunciant. Like butter melts on a hot plate, those words melted something within me. Just as dewdrops vanish upon the emergence of the sun, the chattering mind disappeared, and a feeling of great calm engulfed me. I felt like a tree after a heavy rain, new and vivified. Suddenly I knew the purpose of my life, of this birth. There were no more confusions within. The light of the blessings of my gurus, the lineage of siddhas to which I belonged now, had dissipated the darkness of my vikara, negative tendencies. All I needed now was a vision of God, the Supreme Soul. I craved to see a manifestation of the eternal essence, but craving did not equal preparedness. I thought I was ready, but the goddess had a different view. She knew I had a long way to go, and she was right. The day after my diksha, Baba was sitting on the floor in his room, dressed in his black robes. He was wearing the Tripundra religious mark with 3 horizontal lines and a small red dot on his forehead, and his beautiful matted locks hung down to the floor. The door opened and the construction workers came in. They wanted their outstanding wages. A disagreement ensued between Baba and the men over the wages, and he suddenly started hurling abuses at them. I had never seen a sadhu swear and watched horrified as the abuses became more graphic and intense. Trembling in fear, the workers quickly got up and left. I was confused. I didn't know what was more appropriate, to leave when I wasn't asked to or to sit while my guru was furious. Just then Nikki entered the room with a cup of tea for Baba, and I was relieved. She sat near him while he drank his tea quietly. Then he asked me to leave the room. I went out and sat near in the shade of a young tree. I couldn't get back to normal, though. I never thought that my guru, my Siddha, even knew such words, let alone utter them in rage. I was besieged by doubt. I wondered what I was doing there and if I was in the right place. Had I made a mistake? I couldn't understand what Baba had actually accomplished in his 65 years of sadhana if he could still get angry like that, like any ordinary person. Immediately I felt guilty for having such thoughts. The holy books state that a disciple must have absolute obedience for his guru. I told myself that he must have had his reasons for behaving the way he did. Perhaps it was a test for me. I chastised myself for doubting my guru. Borji is calling you. I looked up to see Nikki standing there. I went back into Baba's room and sat down near him. Don't worry about today's incident, Baba said. Some people can only be sorted out with a stick. I'm an old man and I can't change myself now. Just don't be near me when I get angry because it can get very nasty, he said before dismissing me. I came back to sit under the tree, my mind in a whirl. Although I was shocked, I didn't think any less of Baba. He had been a sadhu for more than 65 years while I was just 30 years old. I didn't feel qualified enough to judge him, and where was my surrender if I doubted him? Besides, he hadn't invited me or asked me to become his disciple. It was a choice I had made, and I expected myself to take responsibility for my choices. I also told myself that I needed to move beyond my judgments and conditioning. Rather than imposing my idea of how my guru should be, I had to learn to accept him as he was, and to live the way he wanted me to. While I could train my mind to think this way, my body was less forgiving. I was finding it hard to adjust to the diet, living conditions and the weather there. To make matters worse for me, the ashram was surrounded by golden wheat fields, and I was allergic to husk. My medication often proved to be ineffective. I was wheezing and gasping for breath much of the time. The pollen in the air blocked my nostrils and eventually led to severe bronchitis. I would have to get up every few minutes to spit out the mucus, in the mornings and afternoons. Since I usually sat near Baba, I had to walk a fair distance before I could spit. Baba used to sleep outside on a wooden bed, while I placed my mattress on the uneven brick floor near him. The mattress was just a thin layer of cotton wrapped in a sheet, and it took me a while to get used to sleeping on it. I would spend the nights dodging an insect the locals called kutki, which means pinch. Unlike a mosquito, it didn't need to locate your vein to suck out blood. It would simply pierce your skin anywhere it wanted and leave an itchy, slightly swollen mark. Baba had a mosquito net that was good enough to keep these insects out, but I had nothing. No matter how I covered myself, they would manage to get in, and I would wake up with little red swellings all over my body. Showing the bites to Baba one morning, I asked if I could get a net like his. He told me to be strong. Bathing wasn't easy either. When I bathed, my body itched as I couldn't get used to the water. I had to use a hand pump to draw water from the ground, and was reminded of the hand pump we used to use at home. When I was a child, there was an electric motor here as well, but it was reserved to fill Baba's water tank. Everyone else had to use the hand pump. Pumping water was the least of my concerns. I was willing to do anything for Baba. I didn't want to bother him with any issues, minor or major. I wanted to be his source of joy, not tension. Besides, he had too much going on and I didn't want to add to his already full plate. He had announced publicly now that he was going to build a temple as well as a college for girls. The foundation stone for the college had been laid by none other than Baba Ramdev, the popular yoga saint. Construction had started, but there was a shortage of funds. The news was spreading in the village that Baba would not be able to finish the construction unless he sold some of his land. After I had been at Baba's ashram for nearly 3 weeks, he summoned me one day and shared his concern about the construction of the temple and college. He said that while he was expecting money to come through in the near future, he was completely broke right now. I told him not to worry, assuring him that whatever I had was his. Baba asked me to withdraw Rs 5 lakh from my account. I informed him that this amount might not be sufficient, as we needed to order building materials as well. So he told me to withdraw Rs 6 lakh instead, which I did. Baba was pleased to get the money. He said a huge burden was off his mind since the construction work could now proceed. He felt it was a matter of honor to finish this project. I told him that as long as I was there, I would protect his honor with my life. But it seemed Baba wasn't interested in my life. Soon I was practically made to starve. Something strange happened just 3 days after I gave him that wad of money. He asked me to not touch his morning milk. I said as usual, Jai Baba, but was taken aback. Till now he had allowed me a glass of milk every morning from his supply, and this used to be my morning meal. It was hard to take medication for asthma with just milk, but I had little choice. Luckily, I managed to arrange for a regular supply of biscuits to go with the milk. I couldn't help but wonder what was going on. Was Baba testing me? One day after my initiation, I saw him swearing. Just 3 days after taking the money, he was asking me not to touch the milk. I had no idea how I would survive or take my morning medication. Why was Baba doing this? Once again, there were no answers, just guilt at doubting my guru. I tried to figure out where I could get milk and suddenly thought of Shesh Muni. A worker used to bring him 1 kg of milk every morning from the village. When I asked Shesh Muni if I could also buy some milk, he flatly refused. You must learn to endure hardships, he said. I was neither surprised nor taken aback since this place was starting to feel like Wonderland. Anything was possible, and I was Alice. I pulled myself up and decided I would just have biscuits and water in the morning. I wouldn't die on such a diet. Shesh Muni's reaction wasn't surprising for another reason. The villagers had told me that he used to be an angry young man before he became a cranky old one. Once a householder with 4 children, Baba had ordered him to become a renunciant when he was 35 and initiated him into sannyasa so he could be in Baba's service on a full-time basis. He never wanted to live this way, but he devoted his life to his guru. Now about 77, there was no one around to take care of him. He was in a frail condition and as good as abandoned. I felt sorry for him. He once told me that he felt ripped off and betrayed by people, and life was far better when he was a householder with a family. I could now understand why he wanted me to suffer. Suffering results in 2 types of people. those who become soft and gentle and do everything they can to ensure no one else has to suffer, and those who become hard and bitter, subjecting others to what they went through. Shesh Muni's health began to worsen while I was there. He decided to go back to his wife and children for a brief rest. Before he left, he disconnected his gas cylinder and put it away, but left behind a jar of wheat flour and lentils for me. The only way I could prepare meals now was on the kerosene stove, and this was a tedious and time-consuming process. I had to take someone's help. A lady who used to sweep the school agreed to cook a meal for me, and without onions and garlic at that. Onions and garlic are considered tamasic as they induce aggression and lethargy in the body. I was supposed to avoid such foods until my sadhana was complete. The lady told me that she could only come once a day, so I decided to divide the food she cooked into 2 parts, one for lunch and one for dinner. When I ate the chapatis, however, I felt as if I was biting on sand. We soon discovered that the wheat flour Shesh Muni had left behind was from an old batch of wheat grains that hadn't been washed before it was ground. As a result, the flour had fine dust in it. There was no way to sift and cleanse it. I was more amused than annoyed at Shesh Muni's largesse. I managed to live like this for nearly a month. I chewed my chapatis very slowly and ate just enough to survive. Could I not have asked someone to get me some more wheat flour from the market? Well, I had brought it to Baba's attention, but he told me not to complain. I was not going to die eating that flour, he had said. Shesh Muni returned a month later and asked me to make my own arrangements for food. He didn't want me eating in his room. I suspected he wanted to make things so difficult for me that I would run away. But I was here for Mother Divine, for my guru. Everything else was immaterial. Since I couldn't cook in his kitchen anymore, I started looking elsewhere for food. I asked the construction workers, who were only too happy to share their food with me. They ate very spicy food though. Even a single bite would give me heartburn because I always ate food with minimal or no spices. Their chapatis, called tikka in the local language, were monster chapatis. 10 of mine were equivalent to one of theirs. I would only take 1/5 of that thick chapati and gnaw on it. Poor themselves, it wasn't easy for them to cook a meal, especially for me, without onion and garlic. So after a few days, I stopped getting food from there as well. Now there was no food at all and I had to return to a diet of biscuits and water. I approached Baba and pleaded for a tiny space somewhere where I could cook my own food. He said that was not a problem, I could cook in his kitchen. He told me to get the necessary ingredients but keep them separate from his. I went to Ranjay Pandy's place, and he willingly arranged for a gas stove, gas cylinder, utensils and other items for me. I returned to the ashram quite excited. Finally, I would cook and eat to nourish my fast deteriorating body. I'd lost more than 15 kg. When I prostrated before Baba and told him I had got the kitchen equipment and utensils, Nikki objected. Baba turned around and told me that I couldn't cook in his kitchen. He asked me to set up my kitchen in the foyer. Feeling helpless, I simply said, "Jai Baba." He went on to inform me that we were leaving for Vrindavan to meet a famous Swami, and I could set up my kitchen later. Before we left, Nikki told Baba that his gas cylinder had finished, so Baba asked her to use my new one till his was replaced. My kitchen, incidentally, never saw the light of the day, as Baba later asked me to find some other way to eat. We packed our bags for Vrindavan. Several other people came along with us. In Vrindavan, Baba happened to see a nice cottage fitted with amenities and expressed his desire to have a cottage like that. He looked at me and said he wanted me to get this done. I bowed. Baba estimated its cost to be around Rs 1 lakh, but seeing the kind of things he wanted it fitted with, I knew the cottage would cost twice that. He told me I was a fool and that he would get it done in less than Rs 1 lakh. As soon as we came back from Vrindavan, he asked me to go to Allahabad to find some specialist construction workers who knew how to build permanent thatch structures. I went and met them, and they gave an estimate of Rs 2.5 lakh. Baba instructed me to withdraw around Rs 3 lakh and get the project finished. Apart from overseeing the construction of the cottage, I was assigned other tasks as well. Routinely, Baba asked me to go from door to door in the village in the excruciating heat to promote his school. Fortunately, I was on a motorcycle being driven by someone else. Then, Baba asked me to teach English to his schoolchildren. I divided them into groups and started teaching them, but I found this physically challenging because, surviving on biscuits and water, I was always exhausted. Baba said he also wanted me to oversee the construction of the college and the temple. In addition, he gave me the task of managing the finances of the school. Eventually, he asked me to assume responsibility for the entire operation of the college and school. To each of these orders, all I said was, Jai Baba. I wanted to be able to put my hand on my heart and say that, as a true disciple, I did everything I could for my Baba. I wanted my surrender to be complete, else it would be meaningless. Meanwhile, the physical environment continued to test me. One night I was sleeping on the floor and woke up with a sharp, burning pain in my right shoulder. I used to keep a small flashlight with me as those were days of extreme heat, and all sorts of snakes and scorpions were out and about. I examined the area around my bedding with the flashlight and saw a scorpion scurry away. The pain was extremely intense, as if someone had put a burning ember on my skin. Just then, probably because of the venom, I had an attack of diarrhea. I knew Shesh Muni had medicine for scorpion venom. I had to go there right away, but I also needed to empty my bowels. It was a strange dilemma. Fortunately, I always slept with a bottle of water next to me since the hand pump was at a distance. I had been using the fields since I had arrived. Though there were toilets at the school, I wasn't allowed to use them. The entrance door to the school was locked at night anyway. I ran to the fields. There were big holes in the ground that almost looked like snake pits. After I was done, I woke up Pandi, who slept outside Shesh Muni's room, and he gave me the medication. It was a homeopathic remedy that had absolutely no impact on the pain and burning sensation. I don't know if it had any effect on the venom. I came back to sleep on the floor. By chance, I lifted the 2 books I used as a pillow and saw a scorpion beneath. I didn't know if it was the same one or another. Determined to not kill any creature, I used a piece of cloth to shoo it away. If I was destined to be strung by a scorpion, I could have killed 1,000, and yet another one would have come to deliver the goods. I got the scorpion to move away and did all this quietly, so no one around me woke up. Anyhow, I didn't die. You can die easily if a scorpion stings you in the vein. In my case, it was kind enough. It had only kissed my shoulder. The next day, Baba asked me to stop sleeping on the floor. Take a couple of benches from the school and join them together. You can sleep on them, he said. Jai Baba, I said. I was saved from the scorpions now, but the mosquitoes continued to bite. I could have covered myself properly to save myself from them, but I wasn't allowed to wear any clothes that were sewn. I had been permitted only unstitched robes. A true sannyasi's robes are not stitched, Baba used to say. I was beginning to suspect that clothes, signs, symbols, and even religion had absolutely nothing to do with enlightenment, but no matter what, I wasn't going to cross my guru's word. My health and well-being, the environment and living conditions, being treated with respect and civility were not real concerns for me. My body was disturbed by them, but I knew I would train my body to adjust. My mind was far stronger, and my intent for being here was genuine. The reason I stayed was that Baba had taken me on as his disciple, and given me his word that he would teach me the secret rituals of Sri Vidya, the tantric worship of Mother Divine. He had assured me he would train me, and I had promised myself that no matter what test God put me through, I would not quit but wait for the appointed day. Without Baba's guidance, my sadhana would not progress, and my desire to meet the divine would not manifest. This was, of course, the reason why I had sought a guru in the first place. There was another vital reason why I didn't leave. I realized that everything I experienced here was a lesson for me. Life was teaching me every moment. One of the most important things I learnt at Baba's ashram was the type of yogi I never wanted to be. While I waited for my sadhana to start, people began to visit the ashram to meet me. After all, I was a sadhu who had done an MBA from Australia, and the news spread. Much of the time, though, people only wanted to know how to get a visa to Australia. I wanted to completely do away with my social interactions, but there was no way to avoid people. It was becoming increasingly clear to me that intense meditation was not a possibility here. In fact, let alone a spot for meditation, I had no place to even rest. During the day, the sun spewed fire, and I would sit in the shade of that unlivable thatched hut, and I had the scorpions as companions, but this time I spoke to them and told them that I would do them no harm and they shouldn't bother me either. Not once did a scorpion sting me in the hut. Sometimes they would lose their grip on the roof, and you would hear a thud as they landed on the ground, but they never breached the peace pact. My day at the ashram started early. I used to get up at 4 a.m., take my bucket from my room and walk to the hand pump. Since it was dark at that hour, I really had to be alert while walking. I had to pass through a narrow area dotted with shrubs on one side and trees on the other. During the night, the spiders would spin their webs between the trees and the shrubs. Unless you were careful, the gossamer web would cover your face. At the hand pump, I'd have a bath, wash my robe and wear a fresh one. Using a flashlight and a small mirror, I'd apply the tilak to my forehead. Next, I would sweep the premises as Baba would be up soon and I wanted him to have a clean environment. As I swept, I would chant the holy names of Mother Divine. Baba often had things he wanted done that day or at a later date, and I used to note down those instructions once my sweeping was done. My day was always packed. Working and teaching in the school, supervising and financing the construction of Baba's cottage, temple and college, along with promotional activities for the school took up almost all my time. One day, Baba suggested I could meditate at night and work. During the day, he added that I could get some sleep once school got over for the day. When Baba handed over all his projects to me, he had said, "I'm counting on you to handle the day-to-day affairs because I can't control my rage." What amazed me was not that my guru was busy in trivial matters, he was doing much of this for the welfare of others, but that he was so angry and bitter most of the time. Had it been anyone else, I would not have been surprised at all, but Baba of all people, after all, he was not an ordinary practitioner. For much of his life he had practiced extreme austerities. He was a Naga saint and a long-standing Sri Vidya Upasak, worshipper of Mother Divine in the form of goddess Tripura Sundari. For 12 years, he had lived with an adept called Harinam Dazaghori in a cremation ground in Varanasi, performing various rituals under the supervision of his master. He had done numerous tantric sadhanas there, in the forests, in remote temples, and in complete seclusion. In fact, Baba had done numerous sadhanas across the 5 schools of Tantra. These are different paths available to any seeker who wishes to use Tantra as a rapid path to self-realization. Dakshinachara, the right-handed path, Vamachara, the left-handed path, Kaulachara, a school introduced by the Saivites of Kashmir which emphasizes the Siva, Sakti union, Samyachara, where the primordial energy of Mother Divine is worshipped within the body, above the navel and descending into the lower chakras, and forbids sexual union with a female consort. And Misrachara, a system that allows mixed practices depending on the state and stage of the seeker. Vamachara and Kaulachara almost always involve rituals and sexual union with a consort of the opposite sex. Dakshinachara and Samyachara, on the other hand, emphasize complete abstinence, whereas Misrachara permits it at the discretion of the guru. The 5 paths of Tantra originate from the Atharva Veda, the 4th Veda. Baba also spent nearly 2 decades in Vrindavan, worshipping Krishna in the Tantric way. The Vedic way considers Krishna as the Paramatma, supreme soul, and human being as Jivatma, embodied soul, and as such, is concerned with the external worship of Krishna in the form of chanting his name, singing his glories, adorning his form and reciting the Bhagavad Gita. The Vedic path says the devotee merges in Krishna after death. The Tantric path is about the inner worship of Krishna. A Tantric does not find union after death attractive, he wants to unite with the Supreme Soul while in the body. This requires complete annihilation of one's societal conditioning of good and bad, because a Tantric will engage in rituals that may be completely unacceptable to society. But Tantra says that in order to experience and see God in everything, you must not be afraid of anything, you must face and experience all circumstances with complete equanimity. The Tantric way of worshipping Krishna involves invoking his eternal consort, Shakti, through Radha. Baba never spoke about the successes he had in various sadhanas or if he did complete them all, but he had spent his entire life in nothing but sadhana, except the last few years when he got caught up in the expansion of his ashram. He had spent 8 years in Kamakhya, the foremost Tantra Pitha, the land of tantric practices. In line with the austerities of Hatha Yoga, he had also done a number of practices, including Pancharagni Duna, where the practitioner draws a circle, seats himself in the middle, and lights a fire in the 4 directions along the circumference of the circle. The 5th fire, the sun, burns above. Baba would do this for 40 days during the height of summer from noon until 4 p.m. Pancharagni Duna bestows upon the practitioner complete control over the fire elements in the body. In the rainy season, Baba practiced Jala Vihara, water wandering, during which he simply lived under tree. In the winter, he did Jala Dhara, water flow, by sitting under a leaking pot of ice-cold water. He would sit naked while 108 pots of water would be poured over his head from midnight until 4 a.m. These methods helped the seeker gain complete control over the water element in his body. Baba had also done the Kardishwari sadhana, where he did not sit down for 9 years at a stretch. For more than 40 years he had been on Falahara, a gluten-free diet. Since starting his special diet, he had only drunk water from the Ganga. He was given the title of Tantra Samrat, Emperor of Tantric Practices, by an elite congregation of tantrics. There was not a tantric sadhana in any scripture Baba hadn't done. All in all, his accomplishments were quite impressive. With all this sadhana, though, Baba remained an angry man. Watching him, I learnt a powerful lesson. Religion and religious rituals and practices do not get rid of the restive tendencies of the mind, because it isn't just about practicing a ritual or sadhana. What matters is how they are done, with what intent and sentiment they are performed. Above all, spiritual evolution requires hard work on the self, on one's fears, patterns and conditioning. External worship doesn't guarantee one will rise above one's ego or negative states such as anger, hatred and guilt. In fact, at Baba's ashram, the more religious a devotee seemed, the more rigid, narrow and egotistic I found the person to be. Watching my daily routine here, everyone around me thought me naive and foolish. They believed I couldn't see what I was being put through. Maybe they were right. "You are being exploited here," Ranjay Pandey said once. "I know, Ranjay, but the truth is that I must only look at my own karma and not the karma of others. Ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, others are just mediums or triggers for my growth. I'm simply learning my lessons here, and I want to do my duty towards my guru unconditionally." "Will you continue to let them exploit you like this?" "If my sadhana doesn't start by the date promised by Baba, I'll move on. But for as long as I stay here, I will live like a disciple should." The truth was that the decision to stay or move on was not an absolute one for me. If Baba didn't have two extremely conflicting sides, making a decision would have been easier. On the one hand, he showed no compassion and didn't care whether I lived or died. He was completely focused on his construction projects and repeatedly broke his promises by postponing the date of my sadhana. He was a guru who swore and got angry like any other ordinary person, who rarely held a spiritual discourse or philosophical conversation. On the other hand, he was a great tantric who had done extraordinary penance for decades, lived a simple life and spoke fearlessly. He was my guru, who had accepted me as his disciple and assured me he would guide me through my sadhana. What aspect of his was I to focus on, to believe, and what qualification did I have to judge my guru? When I was 11 years old, I had brought home an adorable puppy and named him Rocky. The owner had said it was a cross between a local breed and a German shepherd. Others said he was just a pie dog. Whatever be the case, he was an amazing animal. He was only a few days old when he came to us and remained a dear part of our lives for nearly 10 years. He had a beautiful white chest, a beige body and a smooth, silky coat. Always alert and sharp, his erect ears would further stiffen at the slightest sound. While walking Rocky, we had to have a piece of bread in our hands to control him. Otherwise, he would go after stray dogs or practically drag us in the direction he wanted to explore, as if he was the one taking us out for a walk. The scent of the bread was the only thing that reined him in, but not just any bread. He preferred a special type that had a currant on it, freshly baked the same day. Whenever we ate, he sat near us, continuously staring at our food and leaving us with no option but to share our meal with him. A piece of chapati wasn't good enough though. We had to add a little curry, pickle and yogurt. He wanted to eat exactly what we did except for carrots. It was a simple relationship. We loved him and he loved us back. Once while I was sitting with Baba, Nikki brought him his food. The meal was cooked lavishly in ghee. The heady aroma of spices, coriander, turmeric, cumin seeds and ginger mingled with the smell of desi ghee and filled the air. My mouth watered. But Baba never liked anyone sitting with him when he ate, so I was about to get up but found I couldn't. The sensations the food aroused in me were more powerful than my will at that point. I wanted that food. I was reminded of Rocky. I was drooling just like him, gazing at the food as if my life depended on it. I hoped that Baba, taking pity on me, might even give me a chapati. Or perhaps knowing that I was barely surviving on biscuits and water, he would feel compassion and share his food with me. Perhaps my spirit of deep service during the time I had been with him might prompt him to give me a bite, but nothing happened. He wasn't even aware of my leaving, so focused was he on his meal. I knew then that my love couldn't melt him, and my service was of no value. Money I had mostly run out of. I had nothing left to give him. At the same time, I had another realization. What happens may not necessarily be about who you are or what you can give, but also about what the other person wants. Basically, you can't win people over if they don't want to be won over by you. It's not that they don't want that love or devotion, they do, but just not from you. They have invested their emotions somewhere else. You want to be their pet, but they only see you as a dog, a watchdog perhaps. You are attached to them, but they aren't attached to you. From you they get everything too easily, so perhaps you're of no value to them. Ironically, if you don't wish to be taken for granted, if you step back, they become resentful or angry. A devotee of Baba, from another village, invited him to his home one day, and Baba, he said he would come. Meanwhile, the driver was absconding. He had taken leave for 2 days but wouldn't return until many days later. Who would drive Baba was the big question. No one at the ashram other than me knew how to drive. Baba refused to go in a taxi. He wanted to go in his own car, a Toyota Innova. I offered to drive him there. He said, "You are a sadhu and not a driver. I'll take from you work that befits your robe." As the day drew closer, Baba raised the issue every evening. I said nothing, since he had already told me that he didn't want me to drive. Yet I couldn't see him worried, and this was truly a trivial issue. He spoke his mind one day and said he wasn't convinced that I could drive. Apparently, it was a big thing in that village to know how to drive. I didn't know such villages still existed in India. I had driven my Porsche at illegal speeds on the windy Highway 1 from Monterey Beach to Los Angeles, and I had spun the wheels at Mind. Numbing speeds on the highways on the East Coast. I'd measured the roads in Auckland and Oregon, in Sydney and San Francisco, Wales and Wellington, in many of cities across the world. I could squeeze my car into the tightest of spaces and took pride in that. I changed lanes fearlessly, regardless of the number of lanes or the traffic around me. And a village road would be complicated. I was rather amused. When the topic came up yet again, I offered to drive one more time. "Abe tu Backland Hai Raha," Baba said to me in Bhojpuri. He had just used a rather vulgar word to call me an idiot and tell me that I had remained an idiot. I lowered my head. While swearing was normal for Baba, it was the first time he had abused me. He immediately softened and gestured to Nikki to bring a packet of biscuits. Opening it, he gave me 2 biscuits. The day of the visit arrived and there was no driver in sight, nor could anything be arranged as an option. This village was far, about 30 km away. Baba finally asked me to drive him. As I drove, Baba seemed pleased with my driving and said to the others in the car, "This boy drives better than Pandi driver." Then he waved his hand at me and said, "Just go slow." When we reached the devotees' village, we found that they had set up a tent outside the house. Baba sat on a platform that had been specially decorated for him, and I was about to sit on the floor when the host brought me a chair. I looked at Baba. He nodded and I sat down. This was the first time I had sat on a chair in front of Baba. I suppose it was allowed because his platform was still higher than mine. Baba knew a few sentences in English. In fact, he knew present indefinite tense thoroughly. I never heard him speak in any other tense whenever he did speak a little English. "Part is the difference between Indian and foreign culture?" he asked me in front of everyone. I smiled and started answering in Hindi, but he asked me to speak in English. I was feeling rather strange because no one else knew English there. Since it was Baba's order, I spoke a few words. He then told me to come up on the platform and give a discourse on Western culture in English. I went to the dais and spoke a few sentences in English. Then I switched to Hindi and gave a spiritual discourse for the next 30 minutes. Baba gave a discourse as well. It was an interesting session. We were invited to eat in the host's house after that. They spread a sheet on the floor and had us sit on it. We were served puris fried in ghee, delicious pumpkin curry, chickpeas, lemon and mango pickle, ginger marinated in vinegar, raita made from fresh yogurt mixed with spices, and grated bottle gourd. I found myself devouring the food. This was the first time in months I had eaten a decent meal. They also offered us mangoes, and I took one gladly. When they asked me if I wanted another mango, I nodded with enthusiasm. While I had been eating my meal, I had become aware of a certain melancholy in me. Never before had I cherished a meal as much as I did this one. I had always been a picky eater, and perhaps I had taken the availability of good food for granted. I used to think that life had a grand purpose for me, and was confident that there was nothing I couldn't attain. I had believed I knew better than most people. If truth be told, I had thought I was special. What had I been reduced to? Here I was, sitting on the floor in a queue, having devoured my food, eagerly awaiting my second mango. I may have fancied myself as a monk, but in reality I was a beggar. Unlike ascetics, a beggar only takes and gives nothing in return, not even a blessing. I had nothing to offer my hosts in return. I began crying quietly, and a couple of tears fell into my meal. When a mango was held out to me, I raised my hands to receive it without looking up. Images of beggars flashed before me, worn out, ragged, dirty, smelly, unruly, drugged, creepy, strange, mad beggars. Today I was one of them. The eagerness with which I'd waited for my food, the possessiveness I felt towards it while eating, the craving I experienced for the mango, how was my need any different from theirs? I understood why beggars savoured food they found, even if it wasn't tasty. All of a sudden I knew what being one of them was like. And it dawned on me what having no choice actually meant. From being a beggar, I was briefly elevated to the status of a driver when we had to go back. On reaching the ashram, Baba said he was tired and I offered to massage his legs. It was nearly 1:00 p.m. when he fell asleep, while I continued to massage him. After a long while my back became stiff because Baba was lying on the bed with a mosquito net around him while I was bending over, with just my arms extended under the net. I don't know how many hours passed before Baba suddenly woke up and asked what I was doing there. I told him I was pressing his legs. He told me to go to bed and, turning over to his side, went back to sleep. I prostrated before him and quickly made my bed. I lay on my back and it felt nice to stretch out. It was a quiet night like most nights here. The sky was full of stars, the moon was shining and the sound of the crickets was oddly comforting. Baba was snoring softly and a gentle breeze was blowing. It felt as if nature was resting. Nidra Devi, the goddess of sleep, must have caressed me as I fell asleep in her embrace. I used to get up at 4 a.m, but I overslept and got up half an hour later. The next day Baba called me to his room. A few minutes later a couple of other people joined us. Worldly talk began and I sat there, uninvolved in the gossip. Lying beside me was a book on Kabir. I had bought it in Varanasi and Baba had borrowed it. I picked it up thinking it was better to read the words of the saint than listen to aimless talk. As soon as I lifted the book, I felt a familiar but greatly magnified pain in my right hand, just below my thumb. Before I could realize what had happened, I saw a scorpion the size of my palm crawl away. It had been hiding in the book. The other 2 men in the room saw it and crushed it immediately. I felt bad for the scorpion. "How come you breached the peace pact?" I asked the dead scorpion. Of course no answer came. Perhaps our agreement was territorial and therefore limited to only the thatched hut. Or perhaps this was the divine will. Either way, I accepted what came my way. A bluish tinge appeared on my palm, which swelled up in no time. Baba instructed Sanjay, the young man who was pressing his legs, to take me to the village hospital on his bike. The physician there was a homeopathic doctor, but gave all kinds of other medication as well. His clinic was crowded, and its ambience reminded me of a veterinary clinic I had seen in my childhood. A decrepit basket overflowed with used syringes, soiled bandages, empty sachets and other medical waste. On bare wooden beds, some patients sat while others were lying down. Everyone had been put on a drip. The doctor came up to me and said, "Don't worry, I'll give you the injection myself." He clearly didn't want to leave me at the mercy of his assistants. He tried to give me an injection at the spot where the scorpion had strung. The syringe didn't go in properly and it hurt dreadfully. He tried again, this time suddenly and swiftly, and I nearly howled in pain. I wasn't even keen on getting the injection in the first place, because it wasn't an antidote but merely a painkiller. However, it was Baba's order. Ranjay arrived soon after and took me to the ashram. A few hours later I became extremely sick. My temperature soared, I started vomiting and the injected area turned purplish blue. Thank God, I had lost all appetite as there was no food to eat. Even the packets of biscuits I used to keep in the hut had been raided by field rats. I suffered like this for a couple of days. Baba chastised me for not being my usual self, for not smiling while interacting with others. Eventually, he noticed that I was really sick and scolded me, saying I wasn't strong enough. In actuality, he was getting nervous seeing my condition. Ranjay came in the evening and saw my swollen, infected hand, and I looked emaciated like a skeleton. The weakness was even more prominent now because of the vomiting and complete absence of food for the past few days. He was alarmed to feel my body temperature. He spoke to Baba and told him that I needed immediate medical attention. He wanted to take me to the hospital he ran in the village. "Take him away from here." Baba sounded frustrated. Ranjay rushed me to his wife, Dr. Vanni, who was a gynecologist and obstetrician. She examined me quickly and asked if I was allergic to anything. Then she started me on intravenous antibiotics. "I hope it's not some pregnancy-related medication," I joked. She became slightly nervous and said, "No, I practice general medicine." 2. She began showing me the medication. "I was just making sure so you won't have me admitted for delivery." Tomorrow, you know." We all laughed. It felt good, human to do so. I hadn't laughed in a while. A few minutes after the drip started, I began feeling a tightness in my chest and was unable to breathe. I didn't have my inhalers with me. It had all been so rushed that I completely forgotten to carry them. Usually I took them with me wherever I went. There was such a struggle to push my breath out beyond my throat. I tried gasping, panting, and even deep breathing, but nothing worked. Dr. Vanni became even more nervous. This was a village, and it was nearly 9 p.m. There were no shops open at this time. Since she didn't specialize in treating asthmatic patients, she didn't have inhalers or any other medication that might alleviate my misery. Ranjay and I decided to go back to the ashram to get my inhaler. His driver had already left for the day, and he didn't know how to drive a car, so he took me on his bike. It had been raining. As a result, we had to contend with scores of insects as Ranjay struggled to get me to the ashram. That distance of 8 km felt like an eternity, and I wondered how I would survive. Baba was sitting outside with some people when we arrived. With difficulty, I prostrated before him in the usual way. He asked me a question I couldn't even hear, much less respond to. Unable to speak, I ran to get my inhaler. After pumping more than 10 doses, I felt dizzy but started to recover after a while. When I returned to the others, I heard Ranjay telling Baba about my health. I apologized to him for not answering his question. "Go man, go away from here, first get well and then talk to me." Baba sounded frustrated and angry. Even though my life had been difficult here, it was still worthwhile because each incident was another blow to my false existence. Each experience caused one more crack in the hard shell of my ego. When you are treated a certain way, eventually, you start to feel that way. I was treated like I was nobody, and I was beginning to feel like that. I bowed again and Ranjay drove me back to his place. I took a bath and Dr. Vanni gave me a light meal. That was the last time I had to struggle for food. After I was discharged, she began sending me a tiffin box twice a day. It consisted of 2 curries, soft chapatis and a dessert. I felt nourished by the food she cooked for me with great devotion. She also sent fresh yogurt and 2 mangoes every day. Between running the hospital and tending to her own family, she would still find the time to cook for me daily. Ranjay travelled to and fro twice a day to deliver my meals. If not for these 2 angels, I might not have survived at Baba's. Having said that, with each passing day, life wasn't getting any better. My main issue continued to be an environment that would not let me meditate. I had left everything and everyone behind because I wanted to find myself, merge with the divine. I was tired of books and talk, and yearned for the actual experience of self-realization. But here I was, living with a different set of people, and my goal didn't feel any closer. My family and friends were worried about me. They didn't know where I was, what I was doing, or how I was. By not doing what I had set out to do, the very reason I had left them, I felt I was doing them a grave injustice. I acknowledged to myself now that I was simply wasting my time. Baba no longer needed me for his construction projects as they were drawing to a close. From buying stone for the temple to the construction of the cottage, I had ticked off every item on his list. He didn't really need my love or devotion either. He never seemed happy with what I was giving him. I didn't want to beg for a place in his heart. I didn't want to struggle for a place by his feet. I tried whatever I could, I did whatever he asked me, but I could not move him. Guru Purnima, the day you express gratitude towards your guru, fell on 27 July that year. It was fast approaching, and Baba had promised to put me on the path of sadhana after Guru Purnima. I was supposed to buy some things required for various tantric rituals, but he never sat me down to give me that list. I had mentally decided that if my sadhana didn't begin the day after Guru Purnima, I would leave the ashram. Not starting it on the full moon day would have meant waiting another month. I wasn't prepared to wait even a moment longer. I knew the value of time. I had seen good times and bad times, comfortable ones and painful ones. Baba and I travelled to Varanasi on Guru Purnima. His devotees from different parts of India were gathering there for his darshan. There was to be no discourse. He had been a renowned tantric in his heyday, and these devotees had known him since then. Baba didn't yell at them, he didn't swear at them. On the contrary, he spoke to them happily. All day long they sought time with him to discuss their problems. Varanasi had no charm left for me. I asked myself if I could ever find God in these noisy, crowded streets, amidst the garbage and the chaos. Would the moment of realization dawn here? At times I even felt that God had long abandoned Varanasi. There was no sign of him, not in the temples, not in the priests, locals or pilgrims. Bookish, dry knowledge is what prevailed. Baba decided to extend his stay in Varanasi, and I concluded that there was no plan for my sadhana. In the evening he called me to his room, which was full of people, and told me to speak to a Sikh gentleman in Punjabi. He wanted me to tell him a joke. I tried but couldn't recall one. Baba wanted to know why I wasn't laughing and socializing. I remained quiet. There was nothing new to say. He knew what was in my heart. He had once told me that he had not seen God, but it was possible to do so. I had believed him. Whatever that possibility entailed, whatever it required, I was eager to do it. I was willing to give up my life for it. My present quietude upset him for some reason. He said out of the blue, "Kushi si rehna hoto raho, nahin to jak ma. If you can live happily, good, otherwise go F your mother." If there was a human being I had worshipped other than Baba, it was my mother. Hearing him say this untied the last knot that tied me to him. I wanted to kill myself for allowing him to finish that sentence. I didn't feel any anger towards him, only disillusionment and disappointment. I prostrated before him and came away. Perhaps Baba realized what had slipped out of his mouth, for he quickly summoned me back and gave me sweetmeats, but nothing could undo what he had just said. The following morning, some devotees were returning to the village. The vehicle was also carrying Baba's belongings. I informed him that I needed to go to the bank, and for that I needed the key to my safety box, which was at the ashram. I told him I'd be back in a couple of hours. I had actually spoken a half-truth. I did need to go to the bank, but I didn't tell him that I was not planning to come back. It was the first and the last times I lied to my guru. From the vehicle, I borrowed someone's phone and called Ranjay. I knew his number by heart, I still do. I asked him to bring his car around to Baba's ashram in the village. "Is everything all right?" I could hear the worry in Ranjay's voice. "Yes, don't worry." I wrote a letter for Baba and left it with Ranjay. I was leaving my guru in the same manner I had left my family once. I asked Ranjay if Baba might try to harm him. He told me to not worry about anything and to do what was best for me. There was a small sum of money I had left with Ranjay, and he asked me if I needed some now. I nodded. He immediately went to the bank to withdraw it. Meanwhile, Dr. Vanni cooked a tasty meal for me. As I ate, she cried. Ranjay and Dr. Vanni were happy to see me get out of the mess, but were sad to see me go. They weren't two people separate from me, but an extension of myself. Their surrender was second to none. From the ashram, I decided to go to Haridwar by train, and then further on to the Himalayas, to which I had always felt deeply drawn. Perhaps I had been there in previous lives. Ranjay got my ticket booked and I went to the bank in Varanasi. I had very little cash on me and needed more. In one of my dormant bank accounts, I found there was some more cash, a couple of lakhs. I transferred the amount into my active account. Later, some of the investments I could not liquidate at the time of my renunciation because they were in a lock-in period would also yield dividends, and suddenly money would no longer be an issue for my sadhana. I got my head and beard shaved. Catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror, I could not believe it was me. It felt as if I was looking at someone else. I had become extremely weak and was shaken and battered. But my spirit was intact. On my way to the Himalayas, I looked up at the sky. I looked within and I said, "O God, O Mother Divine, if you truly exist, then please hear this. Henceforth I will never, ever knock on any human door. Never again will Swami seek answers from any guru or preacher. If you exist, either show your form to me or I'll perish in meditation. If I'm convinced you don't exist, I'll go to all corners of the world and tell people not to waste their time with you. I'll tell them there is no God." All that I had known and been in the first 30 years of my life no longer existed. 4 months ago, I had cast off the various labels that defined me, but it was only now that the reality was seeping in. I knew I was not a CEO or multimillionaire or an Australian or even an Indian for that matter. I was not even a disciple or a sadhu. I understood all this finally because I found I was truly nothing. This is what my experience with Baba had done to me. It had emptied me of everything I had been, and only when you are empty can you begin to be filled. My cup was empty. All these years of my life had merely been a preparation, and this time simply felt like a wave in the ocean, a cloud in the sky, a mist near a waterfall. It came, and just like that it was gone. There was nothing left to lose now, not even a guru. I was ready to go to the source of all things. I disembarked at Haridwar station in the morning and took a bus to Badrinath, one of the last inhabited regions in the northern Himalayas. Due to heavy rains, there were many roadblocks and landslides. Being in the bus all day on windy roads, I was thoroughly exhausted by the evening. To make matters worse, I had barely eaten anything all day because I hadn't been able to find much food without onion and garlic. Admittedly, it was foolish of me to reject the food that was available while traveling. There is a fine line between sticking to your principles and losing your balance. I'd blurred it. The bus was almost 4 hours behind schedule due to the roadblocks. I got down at Chamoli, 5:00 km before the scheduled stop, Joshimath, and checked into a hotel. Too tired to eat, I fell asleep right after a bath. The next morning I took a shared taxi to Joshimath. About 10 other people also squeezed in. At Joshimath I hopped into another shared taxi. A young traveller in the taxi kept staring at me. I patted my face to see if I'd got anything on it. A few minutes later he smiled at me and I smiled back. After a while he complimented me, saying I had a divine aura. He asked me if I was going to Badrinath, and if I was, where I would be staying. I told him I didn't have a place in mind and would put up anywhere. He offered me his accommodation, and I accepted on the condition that I wouldn't share the bed or bathroom. He agreed. Introducing himself as Dinesh Agarwal, he told me he was a regular traveller to Badrinath and went there once every year. Finally, we arrived at our destination. As soon as I stepped onto the land at Badrinath, I felt an inexplicable surge of joy. The spiritual vibrations here were indescribable. The sky was full of rain clouds, and I was moved by its dark beauty. In those moments that I stood there breathing in the pure mountain air, I knew what it was to just be in the present moment, to simply be. At the Badrinath shrine I could not control my tears. Before me was a form of Vishnu, an idol. Hadn't God created this stone as well? Wasn't he in everything? I just wanted him to come out of the stone and show me his true form. Was this too much to ask? "O Lord," I said, tossed and lost, "a great sinner has arrived at your doorstep. I couldn't belong to anyone, not to my loved ones, not even to my guru. I tried but couldn't win my guru. I haven't been able to win myself either. I know I can't win you, but you are the ever-merciful Lord. Please allow me to lose myself in you. You know what is in my heart. You know there's nothing else in this world I want. I beg you to either kill me or show me the way to you. You are Patit Pavan, you purify the fallen ones, and I'm the most fallen. So please cleanse me. You are my last refuge. I don't know how to pray, I don't know how to beg, I don't know how to live, and I don't know what is good. I only know one thing, my life is useless without you. Test me, torment me, torture me, destroy me, my Lord, but please keep me close. I'm worthless, but I'm still yours. I don't deserve you, but I won't leave you. I'm tired of this world, I'm scared of this world. Do what you will to me, but don't kick me away. I'm tired of pleasing this world, I can't do it anymore. Show me the way to please you instead. I fully accept my defeat. I'm tired of figuring things out, O compassionate, ever-merciful Sri Hari. I've no strength left. Please don't forsake me, but accept this arrogant and defiant pet of yours. Your grace has brought me to the threshold. Please open the door for me. Don't lock me out, don't abandon me. In this holy place, in thy presence, I solemnly declare that your child won't give up crying for you till you show up. Suddenly the skis roared, the clouds broke, and rain came pouring down. Streams of tears continued to roll down my cheeks. The more I cried, the closer I felt to the divine. They were not tears of pain, they were not tears of joy either, they were tears of love and surrender. The door hadn't opened for me yet, but I knew I was home. None of the pujaris in the temple bothered me, and I spent the next few hours in the temple compound, surrendering to the grace I was enveloped in. Something had broken down in me, and I washed myself clean of everything I'd done and everything I'd been. In the afternoon, the sky was blue and the sun bright. Dinesh insisted I go and explore a couple of places with him where I might find a suitable spot for my meditation. We went to Mana Gaon, India's last village before the Chinese border, but I wasn't able to find a location I liked. I couldn't wait to sit in a cave and meditate, with every breath in and every breath out, all day and night, focusing on the divine form. But the universe had another reason to bring me to Mana Gaon. We met 4 young men there who had come to visit Vyasa Gufa, one of the main attractions of Mana Gaon. It was said that Vedavyasa wrote the Mahabharata in this cave nearly 5,000 years ago. Dinesh began chatting with them while I stood quietly, waiting for him to finish. One of them was quiet like me. He seemed to be lost in his own thoughts. I smiled at him, and he introduced himself as Krishna Mohan. Meanwhile, Dinesh and the other 3 decided to go further and see a bridge called Beam Pool. It was said that the mighty Bhima had flung a giant stone across the river to build this bridge so that his brothers could cross. Krishna and I declined to join them, choosing to stay back and have a chat. Quite an adventurer, he had ranged a fair bit of the Himalayas. He was due to leave for Swargarohani, a mountain summit 40 km beyond Badrinath in 2 days. When I told him I was looking for a cave, he decided to take me towards Neelkanth right away. Neelkanth, named after Lord Shiva, is a mountain in Badrinath and a popular tourist site. From Mana Gaon, it took us over 2 hours to reach the spot, situated a few kilometers before Neelkanth. He showed me a cave, a cavity underneath a big rock really, that was good enough for my needs. Krishna left for his trek the following day, and I ventured towards the cave again. On the way, I met a local construction worker who was willing to help me get the cave ready. He agreed to build a wall of rocks, install a small door, cover the roof with a tarpaulin to protect me from the rains, and make a small platform outside where I could bathe, among other things. I was keen to start my sadhana. According to the lunar calendar, the date was fast approaching. The worker told me that the repairs would take 7 days. Every day for the next week I travelled to my cave to see the progress. In the meantime, I got a couple of blankets, a wooden plank, a gas stove and some other provisions. There was another cave en route to mine. A couple of days later, a sadhu stopped me and asked if I could accompany him to his cave. I wanted to know why. He said that someone had come to visit him and wanted to give him a mantra, but neither of them knew how to write. He wanted me to scribble the mantra for him. I said, "I'll write it down for you, but how will you read?" He replied, "I know you're getting your cave ready. I'll come one day and you can read it for me." He was carrying 2 cans of water, and I took one from him to help him. I was younger, so I walked faster and reached his cave before him. I saw 3 people sitting inside, all in ochre robes. 2 were men, while the third ascetic was a lady. She looked like she was in her late 40s. There was a certain radiance on her face. She asked me to come and sit inside, but I declined, saying that I was waiting for the other sadhu to arrive and didn't want to take his seat. She grinned. "Quite some manners you have," she said. I didn't say anything, I just wanted to write the mantra and leave. She turned out to be a Bhairavi, a female practitioner of Tantra, and claimed she had acquired a couple of siddhis. One siddhi allowed her to look into anyone's past, present and future. She went on to tell me a few things about myself, which were all correct. Then she dictated the mantra of the Karna Pishachini and asked me to write it down for the sadhu. Karna Pishachini is a lower form of Devi that a practitioner subjugates and invokes to find out information about someone. The spirit then whispers secrets about the person in question into the practitioner's ear. The sadhu wanted to invoke this mantra in his sadhana so he could know anything about anybody and thus impress them. It is something quite difficult to rise above the desire to be complimented and accepted. You can move beyond anger and lust, you can remain unaffected in gain or loss, but to let go the need for another's approval, what is said or thought about you, isn't easy at all. It takes great insight and a strong sense of self-worth to move beyond this need. Anyhow, I wrote down the mantra for the sadhu. While we were sitting in the cave, it began raining. My reality hit me all of a sudden. I was finally in the Himalayas in the company of mendicants, and I was free. There was no struggle of any sort, no worries of the past or the future. This is where I had always wanted to be, and each moment was unadulterated joy. I felt like a sadhu for the first time. In my devotional sentiment, I sang a full-bodied stuti to Mother Divine. The Bhairavi was delighted to hear it. "I want to impart to you a special knowledge, a supernatural power I have," she said. "Thank you, Ma, but I don't want any supernatural powers. Take it, son, you are the first and the only one I'm giving it to. Thanks, but I really don't want it." "Give it to me, Mataji," one of the other sadhus spoke. "I want it." She didn't answer him and continued, "You have to take it now. I know you'll never misuse it." "Ma, I don't want to waste any time on anything else. I just want to see Mother Divine." "But she was already here. Didn't you see that when you sang, a butterfly flitted about you and then sat on your robe? That was her. It was her indication, a clear sign." "Ma, with all due respect, I have been invoking the divine with mantras for nearly 20 years, and I am sick and tired of signs and more signs. If she, the Empress, is real, why doesn't she give me her darshan? Why doesn't she manifest her form in front of me?" There was complete silence in the cave. Outside you could hear the sound of rain falling on the leaves. Between that sound and the absolute stillness within, there was nothing else. Then the Bhairavi smiled. "Is that so?" she said softly. "Granted." Her words gave me goose pimples. She continued, "In less than 1 year you will have her most unambiguous vision, and then you will visit the Tantra Pitha Kamakhya. There, I have said it." "Really, Ma, I'll have a complete vision." She said, indeed, if you won't get her vision, who will? Indra's seat will shake if the mother refuses to manifest for you. In the moments that followed, I ceased to even hear the raindrops. Time stood still. I felt I had lost contact with my corporeal life, with the world around me. For the first time, someone had given me the confidence that it was possible to see God and that I would get her vision. Her words elevated me to a whole new level of being, as if a million darts of faith and devotion, of confidence and conviction, had pierced through every pore of my being. I decided that even if my body perished in the process, I would meditate day and night and do whatever it took to see God. She went on, now you must do a 40-day sadhana, which I shall teach you. On that mountain, she said, and pointed to a distant mountain. Gandharv, the celestial musicians, will come to you and you will hear their performance. If my words turn out to be false, may I be a leper for the rest of my life. Thank you, but I really just want to do my own sadhana. I don't want to devote 40 days to hearing celestial music. You are my rebellious child, she laughed softly. You can do this sadhana with your primary sadhana, no more arguments. She taught me privately and explained that the sadhana allowed the practitioner to experience other planes of existence. It had taken her 3 decades to master this. She said she could also teach me how to do Vayu Gaman, travel through the air. I told her I wasn't interested because I only wanted to spend my time in meditating on Mother Divine, not hanker after siddhis or supernatural powers. Besides, I told her, if I needed to travel through the air, I would simply buy a plane ticket. Coincidentally, I would end up buying a plane ticket a year later to go to Kamakhya. It is said that some people's words should not be taken lightly. The words of those who practice truth are like potent seeds in a fertile ground. They don't go waste but manifest sooner or later. Everything the Bhairavi said would turn out to be true. I asked her where was she from. She mentioned that she lived near the cremation ground in Kamakhya. I wanted to see her after my sadhana was over and asked her how I could find her. She didn't have any contact number and told me to simply inquire about her when I got to the cremation ground. She asked if I had any helper to assist me with my daily chores. I replied in the negative, saying I wanted to be on my own. You have become a sadhu, but you are a king and will always remain a king, she said warmly. You will always have a helper. Then she added, your guru will burn in hell till eternity. I was surprised by her sudden comment. I had not told her about Baba. Also, no matter what he had done to me, I had never allowed anyone to speak ill of him because he did initiate me. I kept quiet. She said, you are too simple. You don't know what was going on there. Yet because of your simplicity and your childlike heart you will play in the lap of the mother. She gently caressed my face. Kastri Kundali base Emrig Dund. Ban Mahai, the musk is in the deer's stomach. Yet he is frantically searching for it in the woods. After a long pause she said, your sadhana is complete, my son. You already have everything, you need not torture yourself any longer. I listened to her intently. She had a magnetic energy about her, an extraordinary pull. She also predicted the tantric sadhanas I would do in the future, both Vamachara and Dakshinachara. Vamachara, I have no such plan, mother. You will have to do Lata Sadhan, Mahashin Kram, Kaulik Sadhana and Mahamudra. She laughed, for she had just named sadhanas that required a female consort. But I'm a renunciant, so how can I practice the left-handed path of Tantra? She started laughing again. Why not? You think the success in your first sadhana was a coincidence. She was referring to the tantric sadhana of Kali I had done with a woman a few years ago. I was startled and wondered how she could have known this. Why wasn't your guru a tantric? She continued. Besides, the differentiation between a sannyasi and a tantric that you speak of is merely bookish. Your definition will change the day you experience your own truth. Next year you'll have the vision of the goddess, and you will receive your highest tantric initiation. You will know the next step automatically. But what if I decide I won't do left-handed sadhanas in the future? It's written in the book of fate, she said. Anyway, you should do what you've come here to do. Many esoteric sciences have disappeared and you have to bring them to life. You renounced this world to be free, now why are you fettering yourself? I bowed before her. Swami will do whatever Mother Divine wants him to do, I said. On 9 August I retreated into my cave. It was freezing because the stones on the walls and floor were not only damp but covered by tarp, so they retained their coldness and moisture. There was no sunlight in the cave, and I didn't have any sewn cloth to cover myself with. Our body has a natural mechanism of maintaining heat, but for this mechanism to work, Effectively, the body ought to be covered. Fabric that is stitched helps retain body heat. I wasn't wearing any such clothes as I was still adhering to Baba's instruction of wearing loose robes. He permitted knitted materials, although I couldn't see the rationale behind this. Luckily, I had bought a flimsy shawl on my first day in Badrinath, which would prove rather handy while I lived in the cave. On the second day there, I felt low on oxygen. I used my inhaler, but it didn't help. In the afternoon, I went down to the market and got portable oxygen cylinders. Since it was late by the time I was done, I spent the night there and came back to the cave the next day. This would be the only occasion I would leave the cave in the 2 months I lived there. My intense meditation routine started 2 days later. I meditated almost all the time except between noon and 4 p.m. During this time, I kept my door open. I started eating 1 meal a day. At about 11 a.m., it consisted of thin wheat noodles boiled in milk. There was someone from the village who used to keep a bottle of milk outside my cave every morning. Soon I established a routine for myself. Each day I bathed outside during or before sunrise and the water was freezing. But whether I had to bathe with icy water or rub snow into my skin, I wasn't bothered. For that matter, what I ate, or if I ate at all, wasn't a concern any longer. My time at Baba's ashram had made me quite indifferent to such situations. I would spend 45 minutes daily in chores like cooking, washing dishes and fetching water from a nearby river. I always felt such tasks were a waste of time because they took me away from my sadhana. One day, I thought it would be nice if I had someone, a few hundred meters away, to do these things for me. I could eat my meal at his place and focus on my meditation the rest of the time. As the days went by, the locals as well as the pilgrims visiting Badrinath heard about me and began visiting my cave to pay their respects. I was happy during the days of torrential rains because no one could visit me then. On sunny days, however, I had visitors every afternoon. I wasn't fond of these interactions, so I began thinking of inhabiting a more remote place for my meditation. Even though I had never been to Odisha, an image of Jagannath Puri came into my mind. I longed to meditate by the sea and thought Puri would be the best place to do so. I envisaged meditating and living on an isolated seashore. It sounded idyllic. The next afternoon, a voice within instructed me to go outside. I obeyed and spotted a man standing in the distance. I waved at him and went back into the cave without waiting for him. I had done what the voice had asked me to do, and now it was up to God to take it forward. A few minutes later, a man arrived at the cave. He was wearing white, which indicates that he had been initiated as a brahmachari, a celibate monk, by his guru. He told me there were 3 other friends with him, but they were waiting a little distance away. "You are from Odisha," I said to him as soon as he sat down. He looked taken aback and asked how I knew. "Just like that," I said. "Who's Krishna Das?" I asked after a long pause. "Why, he's my brother. How do you know his name, Swamiji?" "Just like that," I said. "No, Swamiji, no one can tell names just like that. I want to be in your service." I then shared with him my desire of doing sadhana by the sea. We agreed that after my stint in the cave I would meet him in Jagannath Puri. His name was Pradeep Brahmachari, and he gave me his brother's phone number. Like me, Pradeep did not have a phone. It was already 4 p.m. and I had to close the door of my cave, so I asked him to leave. The 2 months in the cave were unlike any other place I had ever lived in. Practically, there were many challenges. It was extremely cold and any surface I touched was icy. Rats were a nuisance. It didn't help that I lay just 4 cm above the ground. One of the side effects of meditation is that your sleep becomes light. This is because you learn to maintain a state of consciousness, of awareness, so as the rats scuttled about, they would wake me up. Yet, all this was a small price to pay for living in the Himalayas. Meditation was almost effortless in this spiritually charged land. Thoughts didn't arise as much, and the mind was stable and serene. Moments of deep absorption would arise naturally. In addition to my own sadhana, I did what Bhairavi Ma had told me, and much to my own surprise, I did hear celestial music multiple times, exactly as she had predicted. It reaffirmed my faith in the existence of another dimension. Many a time at night, during the day, at dawn, at dusk, I specifically stepped outside to see if it was just the blowing wind that produced this sound. However, that was not the case. I could hear it clearly both inside and outside. On the night of 23 September, a full moon night, I completed my 40-day sadhana. Bhairavi Ma had instructed me to perform a yajna on this night. All mantra sadhanas require a fire offering at the end to mark the completion of the sadhana. This is done to express gratitude to all the seen and unseen forces, to the 5 elements, and to every entity in creation. I stepped outside the cave after finishing my evening meditation. A clear sky with no clouds, like a quiet mind with no thoughts, gave the impression of a bejeweled parasol adorned with stars. Due to the torrential rains, ceaseless like human desires, the rivers were full and the surroundings lush and green. Under the soft moonlight, the waterfalls, sheets of molten silver, dropped down to the ground in complete surrender, and the earth received them with tremendous love, much like a true devotee who drops his ego and merges with the Guru. The stars felt so close that you could extend your arm and touch them. Of course, this was an illusion the way the pleasures of the world were. The full moon had lit up the Himalayas softly. It shone quietly in the stark crowded sky, at peace with itself, just like a self-realized person. While I was absorbed in my meager attempt to capture in my mind the splendor and grandeur of everything around me, I heard wild dogs barking. There was possibly a snow leopard or tiger nearby, and an instinctive fear sprang up in me. Half a minute or so must have passed before I reminded myself that if the death of the body was destined at that moment, it would not require a tiger to kill. Suddenly, the Himalayas were luminous again, their beauty restored. Pleased at the favorable weather conditions, I created a little fire pit outside the cave to start the yajna. The dogs had gone quiet and silence prevailed now, a deafening silence. With my mind quiet and consciousness channelized, I spread my mat on the ground and placed the yajna materials beside it. The chill in the air had penetrated my flimsy shawl. Other than that, I wore just a loincloth. I had blankets in the cave, but I chose to continue with what I had on. I sat down. After performing the purificatory rituals, I started chanting the Vedic hymns as part of the initial invocation required for the yajna. I felt deeply in touch with my soul as I chanted mantras and poured oblations into the fire. With each oblation, the fire would rise a little. This was probably due to the camphor and other materials in the offering. To me, however, lost in my own world, it felt as if Agni was accepting every single offering I gave. After completing the yajna, I had to go down to the river. Walking from the cave to the river was a tricky job, as the path had innumerable stones of various sizes lying about, and the grass was slippery with dew. The moonlight was a poor substitute for a decent flashlight, and my little torch was less than useful. Anyway, I walked the distance of about 300 meters safely. After performing ablutions by the river, I stayed there for some time, allowing myself to be one with the supernal sound of the river that roared past in the quiet mountains. Eventually, I made my way back to the cave and sat outside for a while longer. My body was numb and cold, my mind quiet and peaceful, and my consciousness flowed like the river I had just seen. An insight began to emerge on the horizon of my mind. Beauty does not lie in the eyes of the beholder, but in the mind of the perceiver. The cleaner the mind, the greater the beauty. The quieter the mind, the more enduring the experience. An empty mind is not a devil's workshop. On the contrary, a passionate mind is, because a mind full of passions is often restless. An empty mind is but a divine blessing, for it is free of thoughts, a rare but coveted state for any yogi. If the mind was an ocean, a passionate mind would be tidal, while an empty mind would be a calm ocean. I stepped into my cave, which felt cozy after the extreme chill outdoors. It had got very late and I had to get up just a few hours later. I lay down on the wooden plank to protect myself from seepage as well as the damp, cold floor of stones, and covered my body with blankets. Mice, like any other night, came that night too. They must have grazed me as they ran past, and made noises that would transform the small cave into a large playground, but I slept unaware and unaffected. Everything was in order, for the mind was absolutely quiet. Where else could I have experienced such divinity? With all the challenges they offer, be it through the harsh elements or through the difficulties of living in the wild, the Himalayas, for inexplicable reasons, remain the ultimate place for meditation. The Hindu tradition says that over the course of thousands of years, some of the greatest saints have meditated in the Himalayas, and you can still feel their divine energy there. I don't have any proof, nothing to substantiate this claim, but, having been around the world, I can say without the slightest hesitation that when it comes to spiritual vibrations and a certain purity, there is no other place in the world like the Himalayas. The mountains of Switzerland, the meadows of New Zealand, the landscapes of North America, the beaches of Australia, the sunny coasts of the Caribbean, the French countryside, I've been there, and these places simply don't match the divinity that runs through the Himalayas. Those places offer exquisite beauty, no doubt. At times they surpass the Himalayas when it comes to grandeur, unobstructed views, even the quietude and solitude. but the help you get on your spiritual journey from the indescribable and unseen forces of the Himalayas, you cannot get elsewhere. Before I knew it, 2 months were up. I descended from my cave and offered my prayers at the Badrinath temple. I thanked the unknowable and divine powers for letting me stay and meditate there. Looking back at this time, I saw that I was able to experience brief periods of absorption, but hadn't achieved the complete cessation of thought. During my meditations, my mind would still wander off, and I would not be able to concentrate on the object of my meditation. Sometimes, people would visit me in the afternoon, and the conversation would play in my head later that evening when I was meditating. Physical austerity was only a small part, an insignificant part of my sadhana. What mattered far more was the mental discipline. I had to tame my mind, completely. In extreme tranquility and concentration, I wished to witness a manifestation of the divine. I had to go beyond the chatter of the mind to have a true experience of samadhi. I knew I had to call Mother Divine in a state of perfect stillness, else I couldn't possibly hope to have her vision. I would have to increase the duration and intensity of my meditation and take my sadhana to the next level. I had to be in a place where no human being could approach me, where day and night I could immerse myself in deep meditation. Until now, even though I had been meditating, the fire that I received was that of a matchstick. It was too little and too brief to give warmth or light. It wasn't enough to burn innate tendencies of my mind. To rise above my own mind, to completely burn my mental and emotional afflictions, I needed a wildfire, the fire of penance. The scriptures clearly mentioned that with devotion and concentration one could see the unseen, know the unknowable. This was my benchmark and the validation I was looking for. The Himalayas had given me a glimpse, but I wanted the full picture. By hearing celestial music and by experiencing intermittent periods of absorption, the divine had only touched me. I wanted the full embrace. As planned with Pradeep in the Badrinath cave, I travelled to Odisha to find a secluded spot by the seaside. Over the next 10 days, Pradeep and I ranged more than 500 km. There was never an uninhabited stretch of more than a kilometre or two, for we encountered fishermen everywhere. We hired autorickshaws for entire days and also went out on a motorcycle to explore the area, but had no luck. We even went to distant towns by train, but I couldn't find a place suitable for my sadhana. I prayed at the Jagannath temple and then told Pradeep I was heading back to the Himalayas. "Please, Swamiji, I've found someone like you with great difficulty, and I don't want to lose you." His eyes filled with tears. "I must leave for my sadhana, Pradeep. Once I am done, I'll establish contact with you," I reassured him. Leaving him behind, I went back to the Himalayas to continue my search. I had heard of the Anasuya temple near a village called Mandal and decided to go there. I got down at Chamoli, took a shared taxi to Gopeshwar and then another from Gopeshwar to Mandal. From Mandal there was a trek of 4 km to the Anasuya temple. When I reached, 2 local boys, Bablu and Vinod, who were the sons of the temple priests, struck up a conversation with me. I told them I was searching for a place to meditate and preferred a cave. They told me about a cave called Atri Muni Gufa and agreed to take me there. It was a lovely site but not as remote as I would have liked. Pilgrims to the temple often came here as well. Meanwhile, something else occurred to me. As soon as I had arrived at Mandal village before proceeding to the Anasuya temple, I had noticed a small white structure in the far distance, high up in the mountains. Apparently, it was a tiny temple belonging to the local deity. The villagers told me that no tourists were allowed there because it was a wildlife sanctuary. Only locals could go there to find firewood and hay for cattle. Some shepherds did have huts there, but these were old dwellings, built long before the area was marked as a reserve forest by the government. Upon asking, I was told that the huts remained unoccupied during the winter since the place was uninhabitable at that time. A deserted location, dense woods. This was music to my ears. I asked Bablu and Vinod if they could show me this hut. They informed me that it would take 1 full day to go and come back, as it was a steep hike of 6 km. They recommended I use the cave, saying it was a more practical option. Reluctantly, I agreed. I paid them some money to buy a wooden plank, some provisions and a tarpaulin to cover the mouth of the cave, which was 5 feet wide. Then I went back to Haridwar to pick up my bag. I had left it behind because I didn't know how long it would take me to find a place, and I didn't want to carry my backpack around. But it wasn't just for this that destiny sent me to Haridwar. I had left my bag with an elderly sadhu I had met in Badrinath. His name was Swayam Prakash Brahmam, and he was originally from Tamil Nadu. Presently he lived in Kankhul near Haridwar. He was protective, even possessive about me. When I reached his place, another young ascetic was there with him. He seemed a quiet, sincere seeker. "You can have a darshan of Mother Divine," I said, when I saw him looking at the floor. His eyes lit up and he said, "Really, Swamiji?" I nodded. "You worship the goddess?" He had never told anyone this. He came and sat near me and told me his name was Swami Vidyananda. "Please say something more," he said. I asked him to meet me the following day. Swami Vidyananda came back the next day and said, "Swamiji, I thought about you the whole night. I couldn't wait for dawn, I couldn't eat, I was so excited. What sadhana should I do for Mother Divine's grace? Self-purification. Will you accept me as your disciple and guide me? We don't need to label the relationship. I'll see you when I get back from the Himalayas." His big eyes welled up. "Don't worry, Swamiji, I'll hold your hand and take you to Mother Divine," I assured him. "This is one Swami's promise to another. I saw in your eyes yesterday that you knew everything, but I was scared to talk to you," he replied softly. "No one knows everything, Swamiji, but I did see that you were special, a true devotee, and wanted to help you," I said. I asked him not to accept money or any material gifts from anyone. I also told him that I would take care of his necessities for the rest of his life. He was no ordinary devotee. For years he had cried for God, searched desperately for a guru, and even kept an idol of Mother Divine on his chest every night while sleeping. He'd fasted, he'd chanted, he'd meditated, he'd done everything anyone had ever told him to. If anyone deserved blessings, guidance and direction, he did. I travelled back to the Anasuya temple, this time with my bag. At the temple, I met with Bablu and Vinod and insisted on seeing the hut on the top of the mountain range. A strange force was pulling me towards it. Vinod finally agreed to take me there. We crossed several streams and walked through dense forests full of tall deodar trees. At times, hearing a sudden sound from behind a shrub or a tree, he would suddenly stop. "Why the sudden halt, Vinod?" "It could be a bear or a tiger, Maharaji," he said. "We have to be careful." I couldn't be certain whether it was because of my stint in the cave or my burning desire for God, but I didn't feel any fear. The trek was a bit arduous, particularly because I had no proper shoes, only slippers, but the woods had a hypnotic quality about them, and I enjoyed the walk. It took us nearly 3 hours to reach our destination, and it was love at first sight. The place was extremely quiet and remote, and there was a water source nearby. Around the hut there was an open field dotted by tall trees, behind which stood the majestic mountains. There was even a small temple not far from the hut. I couldn't have asked for more. I also discovered there was another hut at a distance of about 200 meters, which would be ideal for Pradeep. I had a message sent to Pradeep via his brother, since that was the only phone number I had. I wanted Pradeep to get in touch with me immediately. Even if he was to leave for Mandal right away, it would take him 3 days to reach me. I had to start my sadhana on 19 November, and there were just 3 days to go. Further, we had to be in the hut a day earlier so that I could start on time. Otherwise, I would have to wait another month for the right date according to the lunar calendar. In the rituals of Tantra, the lunar calendar plays a crucial role. Just like your vote only counts if you vote on polling day, not a day earlier or later, some sadhanas can only be started on certain days. This information is never fully documented in the scriptures to prevent abuse or misuse of the powers a seeker gains by way of mantra siddhi. It is usually communicated through an oral tradition. Currently, the chances of Pradeep making it in time were unrealistically optimistic at best, and downright unrealistic at worst. However, when we called Pradeep's brother, he said that Pradeep had left for Haridwar 2 days ago. He said he would pass on the message to his cousin, who was supposed to receive Pradeep at Haridwar station. Pradeep was already coming towards the Himalayas even though he had no clue where I was. Interesting. The universe had planted a thought in his mind before I had even seen the huts. I wondered what he had been thinking. What if I had not made contact? How would he know where I was? The fact was, the universe knew. "Maharaj," said Bablu, "with your sankalp you already had Pradeep start out 2 days ago." "Oh no, Bablu, not at all. I didn't do anything I didn't even know 2 days ago. This is how the divine operates." "What a miraculous coincidence then." We use this word a bit too casually, you know. Coincidence generally means the occurrence of something in a striking manner without any causal connection. The truth is there are no accidents in the play of nature. The creation of this universe, our galaxy, the species of flora and fauna, the 5 elements, a near-perfect ecosystem, none of this is a coincidence. Rain, storms, mountains, seas, trees, they are all there for a reason. Nothing is non-causal, everything supports a bigger cause. You already know so much. I'm intrigued as to why you still need to meditate. Why do you want to go through hardships in the woods? Like everyone else, Bablu, my mind can be talkative at times. It has been conditioned and has lost touch with its natural, pure state. I want to rise above this conditioning, above the intellect. I too have baggage to let go. Off so that I may become light enough to fly and see the world from a different angle. I no longer wish to be a balloon filled with water, heavy and unable to fly. If anything, I want to fill myself with unconditional love and light. Everyone is a balloon. You know, some are full of waste water while others carry a certain fragrance. When circumstances or situations prick them, they burst. But it's only when a balloon bursts that we really know what's inside. Some stink when they burst, they let out foul words, they perform despicable actions. Others emit a deep fragrance. I want to empty myself so I can fill the balloon of my life with love and light, with compassion and humility. Pradeep arrived in Haridwar the same night. His cousin picked him up and he contacted Bablu right away. The following evening, Pradeep was sitting right in front of me. He had a fever, yet he had chosen to travel. The next day, Bablu went to the town to get provisions while Pradeep and I travelled to our destination. My hut, at an altitude of 9,000 feet, was near the edge of a cliff. You could step out and, at a distance of less than 15 feet, fall over the edge. The hut had probably been used for cattle. It wasn't really designed for a human being. The entire space was approximately 30 feet long and 10 feet wide. The hay on the thatched roof was old and mushy, while the walls had numerous holes. One of the walls was made of concrete and tilted at an odd 70 angle. Boughs of trees, several feet long, had been placed on the outside of that wall to prevent it from falling. How that wall withstood the massive and merciless Himalayan storms was beyond all reasoning. Perhaps it goes to show that when you are willing to bend a little, you may look out of place, but you will survive. The remaining 3 walls were made of planks of wood laid next to each other in a haphazard way. Due to the tilting wall, a gap had formed between the roof and that wall. As a result, during the rains, water would come in through the gap. In a corner of the shack, there was a little enclosure that could house 6 to 8 cows, and that is where I used to bathe. I began my sadhana on the night of 19 November. It was a beautiful night sky. A cold breeze was blowing gently and the woods were quiet. When I started meditating, I knew that coming here was the right decision. The peace was profound. Only the locals knew this place, and they rarely came this way because it was right in the middle of the jungle. Even people like Bablu and Vinod, who were born and brought up there, had never been in this part of the forest. Initially, I meditated for a straight stretch of 10 hours, starting at 2 a.m. I also meditated for shorter sessions ranging from 2 to 7 hours. At noon, I would go out to eat in Pradeep's hut. This was my only meal in 24 hours, and consisted of 3 thin chapatis, lentils and, occasionally, a bowl of vegetables. It was due to Pradeep's exceptional organization that we managed to get any vegetables. He had tied up with a villager to have the vegetables delivered once a week. This was not all, though. Pradeep was a great help to me in other ways too. I used to perform a yajna after my meditation every day, and he would stock enough wood for me in advance. Every 4 days, he would also fill my bucket and another vessel I used for storing water. After an hour in Pradeep's hut, I would go back to mine. From 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. I would practice contemplative meditation. Meditation is predominantly of 2 types, concentrative and contemplative. In the first kind, you build your concentration. In the second, you use it to reflect on the nature of reality and your own existence. Contemplative meditation gives birth to insight, and it is this insight that changes how you see and interpret the world around you. Deep concentration leads to samadhi, and deep contemplation allows you to maintain that state while dealing with the challenges of the world. I alternated between the 2 types of meditation. My sleep reduced drastically as a result of the intense meditation. The highly uncomfortable living conditions and the single frugal meal I had also affected my sleep. I would sleep from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. A bath with ice-cold water would follow, while chilly winds blew through the holes and cracks in the walls of my hut. At 2 a.m., I would start my meditation and sit till noon the following day. However, as my mind began quieting down, I could not sleep for even the 4 hours I used to. Reduction in sleep is a natural outcome of correct meditation. Why do we even sleep at the first place? It's because our body and mind need rest. The vital energies flow naturally in a restful state, making us feel refreshed after a deep sleep. Meditation does exactly the same. It rejuvenates your body and mind. I changed my routine and now slept from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., after which I would begin meditating. A few weeks later, I began sleeping from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. and brought my meditation forward by yet another 2 hours. So I meditated for 13 hours straight. Eventually, I gave up on those 2 hours of sleep as well. In a trance-like state, my mind stopped asking for sleep, and my body never sounded an alarm suggesting it needed sleep. Then I realized that I had to give my body and mind some rest, so I forced myself to nap for 2 hours in the evenings. I used to sleep on 3 wooden planks laid next to each other on the floor of the hut. The one in the middle had bent due to prolonged sitting there. There was a thin mattress, no thicker than 3 cotton sheets that I had laid over the planks, and I had a quilt. This was my bed. I was at the same level as the insects and rodents that came into my hut. You would think that living in an isolated mountain abode, miles away from habitation, I would find the deepest silence. Yes and no. While there was no artificial noise, no traffic, TV, or human beings, there were plenty of other sounds that made it hard for me to meditate. Most notable were the birds. They would chirp for hours every night. I presume they were attracting the females. One poor male would sing continuously for 2030 minutes, take a break of a few seconds and call out again with the same fervor. An hour or two later, some female would respond, the communication would start and the male would fly out to the female. Of course, none of this was actually visible, but I could make this out from the way their songs traveled. I had no problem with the amorous nature of these birds. After all, sex, and not religion, is the basis, cause and consequence of evolution. Only their loud noises were a great distraction in my meditation. Imagine you are trying to concentrate in the deafening silence of the night in the snowy Himalayan forests, and a bird starts to make a sound. TNK, 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 TNK. I even found myself praying sometimes, "Oh Lord, if you exist, please send this fellow a companion. Have mercy on him. He's desperate." Over time, I learned to ignore these distractions. Perhaps this was all part of my sadhana. Birds continued to sing at different times and at varying pitches, but they eventually ceased to bother me. During spring, a variety of hornets and crickets would produce exceedingly loud sounds. Hundreds of crickets would stridulate in unison. Whether they all competed for a handful of females or they were celebrating, I had no clue. Learning to transcend such noises took my meditation to another level altogether. Each time I crossed a hurdle, I gained better control over my mind, my senses. Baboons also visited me. These fellows would freely jump onto the roof of my hut, hang on to the walls and peep through the holes. Sometimes I felt they were intentionally teasing me. Of course, that was not the case. It was just that earlier this hut had never been occupied in the winter, so they were not expecting anyone inside. When they were clambering all over the hut, there was nothing I could do because I wasn't going to move and disrupt my meditation for some baboons. When I was outside, I used to watch them swing from one tree to another. The sight always amazed me because I never saw a baboon falling down. If I could have that mindfulness in my meditation, it would have been quite an achievement. In their case, it was in their genes. I suddenly realized that this is what I needed to do. Shift the meditation from my conscious mind, where it was an effort, to the depths of my subconscious and unconscious states, where it was effortless. Over time, I would learn to do this. Initially, when I started meditating, there were many wild animals around. I could hear boars snorting around at night, but as they smelled a human, they began shying away too. They never stopped coming though. You could easily make out from the trail in the snow in the morning. The greater challenge, however, was not from the wild animals. It was from the rats, spiders, wasps and other insects inside my hut. Rats in the woods were as large as they were aggressive. Even though there were numerous holes in the walls and they were free to come in and go out through those holes, they kept on making new ones every day. As if imitating the expert predators, they would drag whatever they could get their teeth on into a corner and gnaw on it. No sooner would I sit down for my meditation than the rats would begin making noises. That constant sound of nibbling was a distraction at the beginning, but I learned to overcome it by persisting with my meditation. The rats often took the liberty of resting on my pillow while I meditated. The spiders, unlike the rats, worked rather quietly. Every night without fail, while I sat absorbed in my meditation, some persistent spider would weave a web from my head up till the roof. The roof of the hut was quite low. Once seated, there was less than 3 feet of a gap between the roof and my head. My mental state was such that, every morning I would forget to check for the web. Whenever I got up, I had to spend the next 5 minutes cleaning my face of the fine threads of the gossamer web they'd weaved from their spit. As at Baba's ashram, I had the choice to destroy these creatures as well. It was not hard to do so. But these were not compassionate choices. I was here to practice compassion, and never so much as a mosquito did I ever hurt intentionally. Interestingly, not once was I bitten by a rat, strung by a bee, hornet or wasp, or attacked by any wild animal, and it wasn't a coincidence. Before the commencement of the sadhana, one of the rituals I had carried out involved praying to various divine energies for their protection. I invoked the Gram Devata, the protector of that region, the Esthan Devata, the protective energy of my immediate surroundings, and the Vastu Devata, the protective energy at the site of the sadhana. The lineage of the sages protects a true seeker, and this is, in fact, the primary purpose of initiation through a mantra. This was not all, though. I had made a peace pact with all the living entities around me. They were all a part of nature, just as I was, and made from the same elements I was. There was no room for disharmony. Apart from the animals, there were other challenges to the body. A seeker goes through 3 types of obstacles: daihic of the body, adhiphatic physical, and adhidevic divine or environmental. My aches and pains were challenges of the body. The lack of food, resources, and amenities were physical hurdles. The dangers posed by the wild animals or the unforgiving Himalayan weather were my environmental challenges, and there were plenty of all these. High up in these mountains, massive storms arrived regularly. Snowstorms, windstorms, rainstorms, hailstorms, and blizzards. The sounds were deafening at times, as if unseen forces wanted to drive me out, or the divine was testing me, wanting to see if I still feared for my life. Or perhaps she was cheering me on, I couldn't be sure. Anyway, in these storms, you sense the magnitude of creation. One man, surrounded by gigantic mountains and dense forests, standing defenseless below thundering clouds and stormy grey skies. But what could nature possibly want from an insignificant being like me? Everything I was or had, including my body, was bestowed on me by the divine. It was a liberating feeling to realize that I had nothing to lose, and therefore nothing to be afraid of. During the storms, the mighty winds would push and pull at the thatched roof of the hut, raising it by a few inches for a few seconds before violently slapping it back into place. Every time this happened, hordes of insects that had collected in the roof, both living and dead, would fall on me. The roof was harnessed by ropes, otherwise it would have simply flown away. I had managed to slip a tarpaulin under the ropes and placed heavy rocks on top to hold the tarpaulin in place. But the winds were too strong, and every time a storm came, almost daily for 4 months, they would displace the tarpaulin. If displaced, it was of little use. Pradeep would climb up on the roof and patiently readjust the tarp after every storm. On one occasion there was a hailstorm. The sound of hail falling on the roof was deafening. I was glad that the wall behind me was properly covered with tarpaulin that had been secured with many nails. When I went out in the morning, I thought the wall looked somewhat different. It took me a few seconds to register that the tarpaulin was no longer on the wall but on the ground, in tatters. I figured that with the tarpaulin gone, rain would seep in through the wall. Since I sat by this wall, my bedding would also get wet. This place had become unsuitable for me, but I was not prepared to leave under any circumstances. I looked up and said, "Is that all you have? Show me what else you've got. I challenge you to move me from this place. I'll die, but I won't move till I see your form. Why just the tarpaulin? Take the roof, take the whole hut for all I care. You can torture my body, but my resolve is unshakable." I wasn't feeling reverential but rebellious. This time I decided to not have the tarpaulin replaced. I was prepared for whatever nature wanted to put me through. It rained umpteen times thereafter, and water did seep in, but it never wet my bedding. I remember the first time it snowed. There must have been about 12 inches on the ground. I started walking towards Pradeep's hut, but found myself unable to walk after about 20 steps. The chill in the snow was unbearable. I had driven in the snow, I had even played in the snow, but I had never walked in it with just my slippers on. I wasn't wearing socks. Walking another step became impossible. Of course, there was no place to sit. I stood midway between the 2 huts, completely stuck. I could not go back and I could not move forward. I was now in extreme pain and thought my feet would just fall off. Pradeep was under instruction that if I went into deep absorption, I would skip my meal and have it the next day instead. Therefore, if I collapsed now, Pradeep was unlikely to come looking for me, assuming I was in samadhi. I wasn't worried about being attacked by wild animals if I fell down in the snow, and I wasn't afraid of dying. I just didn't want to leave my journey incomplete. I wanted to go right to the end. I looked up to the grey sky, the green trees around that were mostly covered in snow at the pristine peaks, and they were all quiet, indifferent. I looked up at the gods even though I wasn't expecting a miracle or help. I was carrying a walking stick with me, which I used because my knees still ached sometimes. I put all my weight on the stick and lifted my right foot to massage it with my free hand, but I could only do so for a few seconds because the other foot was giving up. This way I alternated between both feet. I wanted to believe there was some relief, but there was none. And now, my hands were completely numb and wet as well. Chilly winds were blowing and the sky was now a dark grey. I thought that if I had to fall down anyway, I may as well move towards Pradeep's hut. If I called out for him, there was a chance he might hear me. It took me another 20 minutes, but I made it to his hut alive. Once there, I could not feel my feet for a while. When the blood did start to flow again, my feet hurt so badly I wished I didn't have any feet. Not a nice thing to wish for. After my meal, I now had the challenge of going back to my hut. I told Pradeep that if it continued to snow like this, it would become impossible for me to visit him. In such an event, I would just munch on some dry provisions and try to survive. He nodded and packed some things for me to take back. I tied a polythene bag on each foot. Then, carrying the bag of provisions on my back, I began to walk back slowly. I was better prepared this time, and I made it. It was still hard, but nowhere near as hard as before. It's amazing what preparation can do. The right preparation is the key to the greatest attainments, the antidote to all fear, the seed of competence and confidence, I concluded. It continued to snow, but I managed to get to Pradeep's hut daily, because I wore a pair of worn woolen socks the temple folks had given me. They offered me some respite from the snow. Even though they would get wet, it was still better to have a layer between bare feet and snow. At least I could walk. The snow decreased after January, but patches of snow would remain outside my hut till April, and the surrounding peaks were covered till the last day I was there. The winter made other aspects of daily life rather difficult as well, attending the call of nature being the foremost. I had to go in the woods for the task, which was not a problem, but walking to the woods in the snow, and then squatting on the snowy ground as my feet became numb in a matter of moments was not an adventure I cared for. In some ways, it was even harder than meditating. There I could tame my mind through alertness and persistence, but here my body was subject to the laws of nature. Bathing in winter wasn't easy either. It was icy cold, of course, and it felt like I wasn't bathing but rubbing snow on my body. On the day it snowed for the first time, I had taken a bath at 1 a.m. When I sat down for my meditation. My body was like ice. I covered myself with a quilt, and it took nearly 2 hours to feel the warmth again. Yet there was something divine about bathing on clear nights in the Himalayas, especially when the moon was waxing. In the quietude of the wilderness, through the gaping holes of my hut, I could see the silvery mountains illuminated by the moon. Sleep was another painful experience. Due to the extreme cold, not once did I manage to sleep with my legs stretched out. Further, if I accidentally made a swift movement and the quilt shifted ever so slightly, the biting wind that blew through the hut would make its way in, and it would take an hour to get back the warmth. As it was, I slept for no more than 2 hours at a stretch. If an hour was lost in feeling warm again, no time was left to rest. My cotton quilt was rather small. Given the space, it wasn't possible to have a bigger one. I could either cover my feet properly or my head, but not both, and I always chose to cover my feet. I discovered that I could not lie flat on my belly or back, and have the quilt tucked under me on either side. You might wonder why I didn't source more clothes or snow boots, or make myself more comfortable in the hut. Why did I choose to continue putting up with these obstacles? It was not because I wanted to punish myself or feel like a victim. The answer is rather simple. Our identification with the body is so strong that most people spend their lives simply taking care of the body. The body feels cold, let's clothe it. It feels hot, let's remove the layers. It's hungry, feed it. It's tired, give it rest. We become so preoccupied with fulfilling the body's many desires, cleaning, feeding, clothing, decorating and protecting it, that we become its slaves. A true yogi must rise above the needs of the body. Just like an athlete must push herself to test her pain barrier, to test her limits, a spiritual aspirant must learn to control his body. When we start to tame the body and its needs, taming the mind becomes easier. The yogi must become indifferent to comforts until he has attained not only the state of emancipation, but also learned to live in it. Most of the difficulties I faced were linked to my body. Should I have been concerned about these hardships to the extent that I wanted to make myself comfortable instead of focusing on my meditation? No, not in my world. If you want comforts, go sit in a serviced apartment, I used to tell my body. If you want God, then shut up and meditate. I had always believed that my time in Baba's ashram was a preparation for my time here in the mountains. It was, to an extent, but living here, I realized gradually that there was a lot more that the universe wanted to teach me. Confronting tougher physical challenges here was part of the process I was being put through, to test my resolve and courage, to hone my inner skills, to deepen my meditation. Finally, all my hardships were opportunities for surrender. Without total surrender to the divine, I knew the divine would never manifest before me. Not everything was uncomfortable, though. It was a real treat to be in Pradeep's hut because it was made of stone and kept nicely warm. Actually, both of us kept the fires going. He kept the outer fire alive while I kept the inner fire alive. Both had a purpose. Yet there were ways in which Pradeep tested my patience. He was an incredibly talkative person, a complete contrast to me. The moment I would enter into his hut, he would start talking and do so non-stop. He would tell me what the rats did last night, what provisions they ate up, what games they played, how they fought, and so on. Imagine ending a long stretch of meditation and having to hear about rats right after. But there was a lot more in Pradeep's repertoire. He would talk about his interactions with the villagers and what happened when he had gone down the previous day. Or he would tell me about his past, and the stories would crisscross each other in a dizzying manner. I heard about his trip to a famous temple in Kerala where, while bathing, he realized that the water he was bathing with was the same water that was flowing back into the tap, so he was bathing with bathed water. He told me how he had hurt his finger once, and it was badly crushed and bloodied. He asked his brother to take him to the hospital, but his brother insisted that he wouldn't leave till he was dressed appropriately, and busied himself combing his hair, getting dressed, applying face cream and talc, etc. In desperation, Pradeep ran to the hospital by himself, and his brother arrived on his scooter after the dressing was done. Thanks to Pradeep, I learnt about a certain cult in South India where 4 people would pin down a pig and a man would tear apart its stomach using nails. They would then dip bananas in the pig's blood and eat them. He told me the story of a certain barber in his village who was watching cricket while cutting a child's hair. The batsman hit a 6 and the barber, in his excitement, accidentally snipped off the child's ear. What happened to the child? I asked. He ran out and his father came in and gave the barber a thrashing, Pradeep said. Once Pradeep had a job in a charitable hospital where he had to boil 4 kg of milk every day. He would cool it down and eat all the cream from that milk. When Pradeep was tired of such tailies, he went back to what the rats had done the night before. For instance, one day, he had accidentally touched the tuft of hair on his shaved head with buttery hands. That night, the rats thought fit to nibble on his hair. When you have been meditating all night and you are both enraptured and exhausted from the intense experience, and you sit down to have your first and only meal of the day, these stories are not exactly entertaining. I needed silence and I begged for him to be silent, but the childlike Pradeep didn't understand. He simply could not remain quiet. You can't blame him though. I was meditating and working on stilling my mind. He was simply there to assist me. It is not natural for our species to remain in isolation or to be quiet for long periods, and it is the basic nature of the human mind to express itself. Since I was living in solitude, perhaps only I could understand Pradeep's restless state of mind. He was outgoing and chatty, used to living in busy ashrams in bustling towns. Here he was in terrifying solitude and had absolutely no one to talk to. In the woods, you can talk to the trees and to the wild animals, and if you can hold yourself together, you can talk to yourself. Those companions didn't fascinate him though, and admittedly these weren't easy companions. So he was compelled to talk to me. There was no doubt that Pradeep's dedication for me was absolute. In fact, he had completely won me with his humility and devotion, but I felt frustrated with his meaningless rambles until it dawned on me that the universe had planted him there to test and train me. The only way I could deal with this situation was by learning to remain calm and unaffected. How was this situation different from living in the world anyway? When I was there, life told me stories, good and bad. People had told me stories, long and short. The world had told me stories, true and untrue. My religion had told me stories, factual and fictional. Every experience life put me through was a story in some form, and now Pradeep was telling me stories. I learnt that I didn't need to accept or react to Pradeep. I couldn't stop hearing, but I didn't have to listen. Above all, the divine lived in him as much as in me, so how could I reject him? Whatever life had to offer me through him was just fine. That's what love is, to be at ease. And that's what I learned with him around, to be at ease. I had never shouted at anyone, I had never had a fit of rage. But if there was any vestige of anger in me, I wanted to drop it completely. I had been given the perfect opportunity now. Extraordinary bliss with an anger-free mind is an epiphenomenon, one of the byproducts of intense meditation. Sitting cross-legged for long stretches of time wasn't hard for me, but doing so absolutely unmoving was a big challenge. In fact, it was one of the most difficult things I had ever done. I went through a phase of excruciating pain in my knees. Walking just a few steps was a daunting task, as I couldn't even lift my feet due to the pain. I had two choices at that moment: to quit and go see a doctor, or persist. I chose to persevere and continued with my sadhana. I prayed to the sages, to the seers in the Himalayas, to my Siddhas, and asked them to help me. After about a month, the pain in the knees started to subside a bit. Still, I was sitting for 10 hours at a time, and maintaining my concentration wasn't easy with the pain. To reach the transcendental state, to go beyond the physical body, you have to reach a state where you can completely forget about your body. Bodily movements are highly detrimental to good meditation because they make you aware of your body. Therefore, it's absolutely essential to sit still in meditation, because a still mind lives in a still body, and a still body helps in stilling the mind. They complement each other. Just like you don't need the raft once you cross the river, these conditions no longer apply once an adept has mastered the art of staying in samadhi. At that time, though, I was a seeker and not an adept. I hadn't yet learned to go into samadhi, much less stay in it. Given all the challenges I'd ever faced, by far the most difficult one was the current one: to still my mind completely. Initially, every few minutes my concentration would lose its sharpness. With persistence and alertness, however, those few minutes stretched to about half an hour, and then a little longer, but in any case, maintaining my concentration beyond the first hour proved rather difficult. My aim was to concentrate on Mother Divine without losing focus. If you don't know what I mean, simply think of an object. Now try to visualize the image with your eyes closed. After a few seconds, the image in your mind will start to fade. Beginners can mentally hold the image for a few seconds. Good meditators can do so for a few minutes. Great meditators can do it for many minutes, and the accomplished ones can do it for over 4 hours. I wanted to go beyond and meditate on Mother Divine all the time, 24 hours a day. A loss of concentration is the biggest hurdle for a meditator, and the only way I knew to cross this obstacle was by not giving up. Persistence and patience had helped me achieve what I had wanted thus far, and I hoped these qualities would work again this time. They did, for my concentration began to stabilize over time. I remember wanting to get up at times because the pain was unbearable or because I was extremely exhausted, but I would tell myself that this time would pass. Even if I did anything else, the time would continue to tick, so I might as well meditate. Crucially, I knew I had to persist because the path of yoga was one of great discipline and rigor. Whenever I felt tired, I would remind myself that I did not leave my family, home and comforts to rest or relax. I left them to attain the supreme bliss, to be one with God. I was often reminded of a devotional song my mother used to sing in Punjabi when I was a child. Bhagwan de milna sehaj nahin, pathai kal lahani paindi hai. It isn't easy to attain God, one has to go through many hardships. When you first start meditating, it is an act of the conscious mind and you have to make an effort to meditate. Once you start to master it, however, it takes on a new form. From an act it becomes a state of the subconscious mind, and when you persist it changes once again. No longer an act or a state, meditation becomes a phenomenon, it happens to you. In the beginning I struggled to keep my mind from wandering. Over time it went to the other extreme. I had to make an effort to talk or think of something other than Mother Divine. Like an insect flying towards the light, my mind glided towards her constantly. I was not doing this as a conscious act anymore, it was happening to me. I was always dizzy and felt I was on a perpetual high. There are no words that can really define that euphoric state, but imagine listening to a lovely and soothing sound continuously. After a while you become one with that sound. On 1 January 2011, I took a vow of truth. I decided that I would not tell a lie no matter what, till my last breath. It isn't easy to always speak the truth living in this world because truth can be painful, but it's a virtue and a discipline any sincere seeker must practice. 4 days later, I was about to embark on a 15-day sadhana, and it would be the most important one of my life. This was the sadhana I had prepared myself for all these years. I was going to meditate on the quintessential mantra of Mother Divine, and I decided that the same mouth that uttered the divine name should not pollute itself by telling a lie. It was my commitment to God and to myself. For the upcoming sadhana, I took out a piece of paper and drew a Sri Chakra yantra on it. As a Sri Vidya practitioner, I worshipped the Mother in the form of Goddess Maha Tripura Sundari, one of the 10 Tantric Mahavidyas. This worship has 3 aspects: the yantra, the mantra of the goddess, and Sahasranama, her 1,000 names. Just as a child learning to swim may need floaters in the beginning, the tradition of Sri Vidya recommends using external aids like the Sri Yantra before turning completely inward, where the adept can then meditate solely on Goddess. The word Tri means 3 and Pura means states. This goddess governs the 3 states of our consciousness. These 3 states are Jagrat, wakeful, Svapana, dreaming, and Sushupta, resting or sleeping. These states find a resonance in multiple contexts. For instance, they refer to the 3 modes of material nature: Sattva, the mode of goodness; Rajas, the mode of passion; and Tamas, the mode of ignorance. Further, Tripura relates to the 3 physical humours of the body: Vata, wind; Pitta, bile; and Kapha, mucus. There are also 3 states of human existence: childhood, youth, and old age. At the macro level, you have the 3 worlds: netherworld, earth, and heaven. At a micro level, it also pertains to the 3 states of mind: positive, negative, and neutral. Ultimately, to go beyond all the states, the seeker must remain centered across all states, under all circumstances, firmly established in his or her devotion. Sri Yantra is a geometrical representation of the energy field created by meditating on Mother Divine's form, and is a powerful aid in meditation. Within the Sri Yantra, more than 171 forms of energies are invoked before commencing the main meditation on the goddess's mantra, which is chanted mentally. These energies elevate the seeker's state of mind and help it remain centered during and after the meditation, so he or she can remain focused on the thoughts of Mother Divine. Sahasranama, 1,000 names, are used to call upon the goddess in reverence and devotion. The idea behind chanting her 1,000 names is to cry out for her the way a child does for its mother. It is to become a child. Young children are free from negative emotions like hatred, jealousy, and malice, great obstacles for a devotee. So the Sri Yantra covers the visual and the energy aspect. The mantra is for the mental aspect and Sahasranama is for devotion. When you are visually meditating on the Sri Yantra, when you are mentally meditating on the goddess's mantra, when you are verbally chanting her names, you're practically living in her all the time. This is a state a seeker must reach to experience complete and unwavering oneness with God. I meditated on Mother Divine in this way for nearly 20 hours each day. Once you immerse yourself completely, there comes a time when you not only see the divine but merge in the divine. You attain complete union with God. In my devotion, I had seen God as a being, a person almost, because it made it easier to surrender to a personalized form. Now my yogic mind was beginning to see God as the essence of everything: the fragrance of the flower, the heat of fire, the chill in ice, the venom in a snake. The ultimate test of my devotion and my focus, though, was to see a manifestation of that essence. I wanted my concentrated thought to manifest before my eyes. My ability to sit unmoving for exceptionally long periods in meditation improved significantly with time. There came a stage when I stopped moving my head or my eyes to find out what the rats were doing on my lap or around me. From that stillness would gush forth the greatest fountain of bliss I had known. Perfecting the gaze is one of the subtle but promising signs of progress in meditation, because when you are meditating deeply, even a slight movement of the eyeball is enough to bring your awareness back to the body, and it breaks the concentration. My quiet and concentrated mind gave birth to an unusual phenomenon. I realized I could shut down my heartbeat at will. I didn't do any yoga, I wasn't focusing on it. It just happened naturally as a result of my extremely powerful meditations. I gained significant control over the involuntary functions of my body, including the regulation of blood pressure, body temperature, and pulse rate. My consciousness traveled beyond my body and explored other planes of existence. However, I knew well that such experiences of astral travel could simply be a state of mind rather than any actual travel. The boundaries are blurred when you move through various states of consciousnesses. No doubt these attainments made me feel I was progressing, particularly because I was able to reproduce my experiences at different times of day. This gave me the confidence that there was cause and effect at work here, a scientific basis, rather than my imagination playing tricks on me. At the same time, I knew that these occurrences were distractions and only the byproducts of the meditation. They were not my goal. As my sadhana continued, I was startled to discover powerful sensations building in my head. I did not take the idea of chakras very seriously and had stopped meditating on chakras years ago. Sensations emerged in those psychoneurotic plexuses on their own and were strongest in my forehead and head. I don't know of any word in any language that could possibly describe these sensations. How do you tell someone what a rose smells like? The only way to find out is to smell one. There was no pain or heaviness, only waves of deep bliss. I thought these sensations would go away, but they didn't. In fact, I still experience them at all time. I had never read about this sort of experience anywhere. One Buddhist text had mentioned these sensations briefly, but my yogic scriptures were quiet about it. What was happening to me? What did these sensations mean? I had no clue, but despite all the powerful experiences I was having, I knew I could not get attached and had to press on with my sadhana. I still hadn't felt the divine embrace, I was still desperate, I was still incomplete, I was still just me. Despite the intensity and concentration with which I meditated, and the desperation in my heart, I still hadn't seen a manifestation of the divine. I didn't even know if the improvement in the meditation was any indication of my progress. I was already meditating to the maximum extent possible. I decided I had to be patient until the completion of my sadhana. On 13 February 2011, exactly 40 days since I had started meditating on Mother Divine with the Sri Yantra and the mantra, something completely unexpected happened. Just a few days earlier, I'd changed my routine and started meditating from 9 p.m. until 1:00 a.m. around 5 a.m. While I was meditating with full awareness, a form appeared a few feet away from me. It was partially turned away from me. In the past 2 decades, I had done tantric sadhanas of various devis, yoginis, yakshinis, apsaras, which were all lower energies of Mother Divine. At times I had seen celestial forms, but these visions had been too short-lived to make any sense to me. At other times I had encountered figures in dreams. This time, since I was awake, I thought I was seeing a celestial form like the previous times, and that it would disappear soon. Either way, I considered this a distraction that had appeared to disrupt my meditation. With a firmer resolution and stronger equanimity, I brought my attention back to my meditation. The form didn't disappear, it continued to face the wall. Suddenly it began moving its hands in a rhythmic way. Now one hand moved and then the other, now the right arm swayed and then the left one swayed. Not wanting to get distracted by the hypnotic movements of the hands, I focused my attention on the mantra. The form sat on the floor and faced me. I still didn't look at it properly. I was in deep absorption and determined to ignore this being. Ayojai, Ayojai, Sarvanand Baba, Ayojai, come here, O Sarvananda, come here, a most mellifluous feminine voice called out to me. Despite the fact that she had used the name Baba had given me, I took no heed and persisted with my meditation. A few moments later, she repeated the call. Thinking it was a Nitya, female celestial being, one of the companion energies of Mother Divine, I continued to pay no attention. After calling my name for the 3rd time, she turned towards me and looked at me directly. I couldn't disregard her anymore. After all, she knew the name I rarely used or disclosed, and she was persistent. If this was an undesirable being, or if she had come to just bless me, she would have disappeared by now. Instead, this figure was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, just the way a mother sits with a child. I did something I had never done before. I decided to get up during my meditation. It was bitterly cold and I was wearing woolen socks. I quickly took off my socks so that I could greet the manifestation barefoot. There was not enough space to do a full-length prostration. Going past the Sri Yantra, I lay somewhat diagonally over the cold fire pit and offered my obeisance. I'm Sarvananda, I said and looked up. Like wax that cannot withstand the heat, like darkness that disappears into light, I lost myself. What could I, a tiny drop, have known about the ocean? How could have I imagined that I would be looking into the effulgent eyes of the Creator, the Empress? Watching me was the one I had waited for my entire life. She had come. I took in her fair face, the brilliance of her eyes, her small nose and full lips, the hair that flowed down to the ground like a black river. Her radiance was unbearable and I could not endure the sight of her. Just before I collapsed, she lifted me swiftly but gently and raised me above her head as if I were a mere toy. I put my arms around her neck. When I glanced down at her, her flashing eyes annihilated every molecule of my existence as I had known it. I hid my face in her hair and entered a different world. It was an unending abyss as dark as her eyes were bright. Taking me through unimaginable spaces in the cosmos, she showed me the nature of duality and how darkness and light, joy and sorrow were inseparable. With a soft jerk of her arms, she made me tilt my head back, and now she was looking up at me. A myriad sentiments pushed me into an inexplicable state of consciousness. I hid my face in her hair again. At my bidding and because of my unrelenting and persistent cries, she had come. Yet now that she had, what did I have to offer her? Nothing. She, the owner of the universe, sat on an uneven, dirty floor in a broken hut in the wilderness. Someone as magnificent as her should have been on her celestial throne. I didn't know how to welcome her, and wondered how a beggar was to offer hospitality to a queen. I had nothing pure enough to offer her. My heart, my body, my mind were all impure. I had no naivety. Food offered with reverence. I did not even have flowers, but I wanted to give her something. What could be purer than her own name, I thought. A eulogy to Mother Divine sprang out of me, gushing forth from the deepest recess of my heart. I raised my head only just and sang out as loud as I could. She gently swayed me back and forth one more time and gave me the most enigmatic smile full of compassion, love and mercy. She then put me down and disappeared. She was everything I ever wanted, all that I had ever known. My watch read 5:08 a.m. I prayed loudly and cried heartily. I even laughed. For a while I alternated between praying, crying and laughing. Gradually I realized where I was and what had just occurred. To the non-believer or to the rest of the world, my experience may be dismissed as a hallucination or the product of a schizoid mind. And that's perfectly fine because, if someone had told me about such a thing earlier, I wouldn't have believed it either. There may be an imagination vivid enough to capture my experience, but there are certainly no words apt enough to describe what I saw. There was no doubt that what I had experienced was as real as the mountains, the hut, the floor I sat on, my very breath. The words, the touch, the play were all genuine, but I had no proof. Only someone who could enter my state of being could see my reality. In that one vision, I had seen the primordial principle, the creative energy. What I had come to seek I had found, but I wasn't ready to leave just yet. I wanted to fulfill my vow of spending a certain period of time there and honor the Mother's mantra as well as the other divine energies who are worshipped as part of the tantric sadhana I was practicing. Crucially, I needed to learn to live with the bliss that I had stepped into, or found within. I wanted to pray for the welfare of all sentient beings and pay homage to the lineage of Siddhas I was a part of. I began to experience an extraordinary bliss, and this was constant. But at the same time I was always dizzy. Sometimes I felt as if someone was tugging at a point inside my brain. At other times I got the feeling my forehead was being massaged. Daily functions such as walking, eating, talking to Pradeep and listening to his stories became difficult. I had to learn how to absorb the powerful energies flowing through me. Thus I decided to enter strict solitude for 100 days. I needed this time to absorb the vision. I informed Pradeep about my plan and his meticulous management made it possible. I changed my routine and began meditating from 7 p.m. until 4 a.m. If once or twice a month the villagers passed this way for hay, Pradeep would tell them to keep absolutely quiet. They maintained both distance and silence. During this period I neither met nor saw anyone. Pradeep would wake up at 1 a.m., take a bath, say his prayers and prepare my meal. Before 4 a.m. he would come to the little temple near my hut, ring a bell and hide behind the temple wall so that we did not see each other. I would then step out and go to his hut for my meal. Eating would take me nearly an hour because it was nothing short of a ritual for me. It was an opportunity to express my gratitude to Mother Nature, to the farmers who produced the grain and to Pradeep who cooked it. The digestive fire in the stomach is called Vaishvanara. I would offer every bite to this fire, akin to the fire offering in a yajna. I still do for that matter. While I was gone, Pradeep would wait for me quietly or refill the water bucket in my hut. He'd also fix the tarpaulin on the roof in case a storm had blown it about at night. If I needed to communicate something, I wrote a note and left it in his hut. Towards the end of March, I felt a shooting pain near my kidney. I was startled because I had already perfected my posture and wasn't expecting any more pains. I'd already been through excruciating knee pains, severe backaches, a tired body and aching arms and shoulders. What was this new pain? The middle plank of my bed had completely sunk, making it an uneven and unsuitable surface to sit on. Perhaps my posture was the cause of the pain. I placed my pillow on the plank, but this didn't help. I took an hour out of my sleep time and did some yoga asanas to stretch my body. This alleviated the pain just a little. It was becoming impossible for me to sit still for hours at a time, which is what I needed to do. I wasn't going to give up on my 15-day meditation though. I had to get rid of this pain. Reflecting on the pain, it occurred to me that I hadn't seen the sun for nearly 2.5 months. I took my morning meals when it was still dark. I used to step out occasionally during the day, but I hadn't been out at all in the sunlight for nearly 10 weeks now. I had been living in an extremely cold hut and didn't use a fire to warm myself. The next day, instead of yoga, I spread a mat and sat outside with my back towards the sun. That night the pain subsided to a large extent. I repeated the process for the next few days and the pain disappeared. I would never know what really caused it, but sitting in the sun relieved it. Enjoying the sweetness of solitude, diving deep into the ocean of a still mind, I passed my days in deep meditation and crystal-clear awareness. I was acutely aware of everything around me, the sounds of hornets and wasps, a spider crawling on the wall, every drop of rain that fell. Any thought that emerged in my mind would not go unnoticed. This was truly an extraordinary level of awareness. My intuitive faculties entered a new dimension. No matter what question I thought of, an inner voice gave me the answer. One day during meditation, the same inner voice instructed me to visit Kamakhya temple. I would get Sarvok Tantric Diksha, the highest tantric initiation there, it said. I was reminded of Bear Ravimar who had foretold this in Badrinath. I decided to visit Kamakhya after the completion of my sadhana. But right now, I simply lived in the present moment. I was a boat sailing in an ocean of bliss. Why, I was the ocean itself. The silence within me was beyond description. Just as you churn milk and it turns into butter, and that butter can never become milk again, my mind had reached an irreversible state of peace and joy. I felt that to remain unaffected, no matter what the circumstances, to be unmoved by someone's birth, death, acceptance, rejection, praise, or criticism, this sense of dispassion and detachment was arising from within me without any effort. I opened my notepad and scribbled in it. Self-realization is not an instantaneous act. We may have an aha moment, but it is mindfulness that allows us to navigate the world with the utmost awareness of our verbal, mental, and physical actions. It is one thing to grasp that we are not just the body, but it is another thing altogether not to react when someone hurts us. We may recognize that anger destroys our peace of mind, but to remain calm, no matter how strong the provocation, that is real realization. Why did it take the Buddha 6 years to achieve liberation? If it was an instantaneous thing, he could have had it in the first month. It took Mahavira 10 years and Ramakrishna Paramahamsa 12 years. The experiences, lessons, insights add up, finally bringing one to the point of realization. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, but it takes a little while to get to that temperature. The flame that heats the water already holds the potential to burn as powerfully as the sun, but it is the water that needs to come to a boil. The soul or consciousness is ever pure. It is the conscious mind that needs to reach boiling point, while the subconscious has to imbibe the insights and the learning. When Jesus was crucified, he didn't react. He simply forgave. When Gandhi was shot, he didn't say, "Oh damn, I've been shot, who did it?" He said, "Hey Ram." He remembered his God. An epiphany or a sudden flash of realization is assimilated and processed by the conscious mind, but true liberation manifests deep in the subconscious mind. It is this part of the being that has to be trained to attain realization. Enlightenment teaches us how to live in the world with grace, independence, and joy. I wanted to write more but felt dizzy, and the words swam before me. I did contemplate casting off my body and merging in the supreme consciousness, for there was nothing more I wanted from the world. Life had given me everything I could possibly seek and more. I had become what I had once sought. The seed of my individual existence had perished in the soft earth of realization. My journey was complete. I had the choice of letting go my physical body, but I felt that dropping it would be selfish of me. I owed it to the universe to pass on what I had learned. I didn't want to direct people, but only guide them and walk with them, for I firmly believe that we must learn to lead ourselves and not be led by others. For that matter, even within. Most of us are controlled by our thoughts and emotions, whereas it should be the other way around. Enlightenment turns the tables on us. We lead our thoughts and emotions. It was time to redefine monkhood. Why should a monk be a burden to society? He should take responsibility for his own life and not depend on others for his needs. I wanted to be a monk, not a mendicant. I vowed never to accept donations for my personal needs. I did not want to build an organization with ashrams everywhere. I had to stay focused on my mission to enable other seekers to revel in the same nirvana that I did. I was going to descend from the Himalayas on 3 June, and Pradeep informed the villagers that I would be coming to stay in the village for a couple of days. With my sadhana over, he had decided to go on a pilgrimage to the Jagannath temple. I would see him later in the year. On 4 June, many villagers came to receive me. Bablu was very keen for me to stay at the Anasuya temple in Chamoli. I agreed, and also conducted a small ritual of Kumari Pujan, where girls below the age of 16 are worshipped in the form of the mother and offered gifts. After the ritual, everyone was given a meal. 40 people ate to their hearts, content food made from just 2 aubergines and 1 cauliflower. Some people even got 2 servings. I'm not saying it was a miracle, but I am expressing my surprise at the mysteries of providence. Did the curry multiply? It doesn't matter. What does matter is that everyone went home well fed. While leaving the woods, I felt pensive for a moment. I say pensive because this place hadn't just been quiet and lovely. It is where Mother Divine had come to me. It was a reflection of her. But then again, what isn't her reflection? Besides, no matter how much I loved being there, I had to move on. Having eschewed the world, it was pointless becoming attached to mountains. An attachment, it doesn't matter to what, is the cause of bondage and suffering anyway. The trees and I had something in common, a sense of dispassion and detachment. Like me, they remained rooted to the ground, and I remained rooted in my devotion. They didn't change their position, they didn't try and tempt me to return. I did not alter my stance either, for I realized the only thing worth loving was the emotion of compassion and not the object of compassion. After all, parting from loved ones is inevitable. Both nature and I understood this. I thanked the woods and walked away with a joyous heart, once again immersed in the thought of Mother Divine. The powerful sensations in my head continued to affect me, and I still found it difficult to perform daily tasks. I wanted more time in solitude to be able to learn how to function in this altered state of being. During my 2-day stay at the Anasuya temple, I met a sadhu who asked me to come and visit him in his cave. I accepted even though I had no desire to do so. Bablu accompanied me the next day to his cave and clicked my picture with his phone. And so it was that I had a good look at myself after 7 months. I had used a small mirror in the woods to put the tilak on my forehead, but it was too small to show my entire face. Unsurprisingly, I had grown a beard and my head needed to be shaved again, but expecting sunken cheeks and pale skin, I was not prepared for how healthy I actually looked. There was a radiance on my face I was completely unfamiliar with, and my eyes had a strange glow. Was this really me? On our way back to the temple, I found it difficult to walk because the sensations in my head were overpowering. I felt dizzy and looked down. All of a sudden, the ground disappeared from sight. My inner vision opened up to receive everything that there was before me: the ground beneath my feet, the leaves strewn about on the path, the trees, the person walking beside me, the black snake that just slithered past and dashed behind the rocks, the skis. Everything simply merged into me. Or did I merge into everything? I could not walk a step further and sat down in the middle of the path. I told Bablu I was going into a deep trance. All this was happening was because I hadn't yet learned to absorb the state of deep tranquility I had reached, and continue with my daily activities at the same time. Bablu asked me how long this state would last, and I told him I didn't know. He was kind enough to wait there. After a little I felt more centered and we slowly walked back to the temple. The next day I got tonsured and left for Haridwar. After spending a few days there with Swami Vidyananda, I went to Kamakhya on 19 June. A big festival was due to start there after 3 days, and the crowd was building up. I had never cared for crowds. I made my way to the temple and rather than approaching anyone, decided to wait for 5 minutes in the temple compound. If the instruction I had received in the mountains was the truth and not just my hallucination, someone should approach me, I thought. I had developed a method of conversation with Mother Divine back in the woods. I told her now that I was only going to wait 300 seconds by the clock. If no one came to me during this time, I would move on. I circumambulated the temple, came back to the compound, took the watch out from my pouch and began the 5-minute countdown. Less than 2 minutes later, a man clothed in a white kurta pajama waved at me. This action met all my conditions. I didn't initiate the interaction, it was within the 5-minute limit, and he seemed eager to talk to me. I walked up to him. Even though he was a Brahmin, he was sitting next to a tantric clad in black, who turned out to be an Aghori. Aghora is a school of Vamachara Tantra. This Aghori, however, like the majority out there, was more a boaster than a practitioner. Just as a good workman doesn't go around displaying his tools, a good Aghori doesn't put his implements on display. This man, however, had made a circular fire pit and laid out various items beside it: a human skull, bones, a box each of vermilion powder and turmeric, a metallic bowl, and containers with grey as well as black ash, among other things. All this was merely to attract and fool people. After all, an Aghori has no business conducting any rituals during the day. All Aghora rituals are done at night, and a real practitioner is always discreet. But the man's karpa, begging bowl, looked inviting. It was made from a kapal, human skull. He let me inspect it, and I have to admit that it was highly energized. Just like bats can hear sounds over and above the range of frequencies audible to human ears, and they use this knowledge to move around, pray and protect themselves, a seeker practicing sadhana develops a sensitivity to energy beyond what the average person can feel. An adept then uses this energy to help others. When I held the skull in my hand, I experienced a flow of energy and could tell that this was not the skull of an ordinary man. It belonged to an Aghori. I told him it was an amazing karpa. In response, he gave a proud smile and nodded. Then, in a flurry of words, he informed me that his god brother had died of snake bite, and with their guru's permission, he had taken the head, skinned it, prepared it with the right rituals for 40 days, and served wine in it to his guru before making it his karpa. Meanwhile, the Brahmin, who was the reason why I had even sat down beside the two men, wanted to know what was I doing at Kamakhya. Instead of answering his question, I told him why he was there and what he had been doing the past few years. Then I went on to explain why his sadhana had not been successful. He could not hide his shock and began to weep. Without saying another word or acknowledging what I had just said, he got up and left. I resumed my conversation with the Aghori. Some 15 minutes passed and I was beginning to feel that I was wasting my time. I was about to leave when the Brahmin returned. He asked me again, with much reverence this time, what had brought me here. Had I come for the festival? I simply said that I had come to do sadhana for a month and asked him if he could recommend an isolated location for me. Suddenly the Brahmin shouted out loud, "I sadhu," and waved at another ascetic. This ascetic, also in white, came over and joined us. The two began chatting. A few minutes later I told them I was leaving. Upon hearing this, the ascetic who had just arrived insisted that he wanted to offer me a meal. I wasn't keen, but he wouldn't let me go. I agreed and the three of us went to his place, leaving the Aghori behind since he couldn't leave his fire pit unattended. It turned out this sadhu wanted to do a mantra purishcharana, a rite of mantra worship and invocation that is done over a certain number of days. For example, to do a purishcharana of the Gayatri mantra, a practitioner may decide to chant the mantra 1.2 lakh times over 40 days. Therefore, the mantra will have to be chanted 3000 times every day beginning at exactly the same time each day. There are 4 other components of a purishcharana: yajna, fire offerings; tarpana, libations of water or other alchemical concoctions; marjana, ablutions for self-purification done with the same concoction as the libation; and sadhaka bhajana, where Brahmins or other adepts are fed at the conclusion of the ritual. Before this ritual can begin, other preliminary rituals need to be performed, including the invocation of the divine forces and protective energies. The seeker must be able to chant the preparatory mantras in Sanskrit. The condition of the preliminary rituals can only be waived if the purishcharana is done the tantric way or at the instruction of the guru. This sadhu was doing a Vedic purishcharana and had to carry out the necessary rituals. He asked the Brahmin to initiate the process of worshipping the local deities, but the Brahmin didn't know how to conduct this ritual. He only practiced tantra. The sadhu looked at me expectantly. I had renounced samsara, and a renunciant is not supposed to perform religious rites for others. Since he was a sadhu and a genuine one at that, I decided to perform the rituals for him. Responding with gratitude, he served us delicious khichdi and asked me the reason for my visit to Kamakhya. I said I was looking for a suitable spot for a month-long tantric worship. He suggested a cave called the Siddhi Ganesh Gufa, which also contained a Panchmundi asana. Panchmundi asana is a tantric seat made by burying the skulls of 5 different creatures, including that of a human, in the ground. The spot is then filled with ash from a funeral pyre, along with turmeric and other ingredients. Sitting on the consecrated seat and invoking the goddess through esoteric mantras is an important tantric practice. When I heard about this cave, I immediately left his house and followed the directions he had given me. At a spot near a particular temple he had indicated, I had to descend a flight of 300 steps to reach the Siddhi Ganesh Gufa. It was by the banks of the Brahmaputra River. Unfortunately, 2 sadhus were already living there. One of them was a tantric absorbed in prayer. He was sitting not on top but in front of the Panchmundi asana and had placed an oil lamp on the actual seat. As I stood waiting for the tantric to finish his prayers, the other sadhu tried to engage me in small talk. I was least interested in this conversation and made to leave when the tantric finished his puja and approached me. I told him that it was somewhat foolish to sit in front of the asana rather than upon it. It was like sitting next to a swimming pool and chanting water, 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 hoping you would get wet. I suggested some minor changes he could make to benefit more from his sadhana. He was deeply touched and asked me why I was there. Even to him, I just said I was looking for a quiet place to meditate. He suggested I meet a certain sadhu he knew who was a highly qualified tantric. I was reluctant, but he insisted and offered to take me there. The next day we met the tantric. In his mid-50s, he was a Vamachari tantric. When I sat in front of him, the same voice that had instructed me in the Himalayan woods to visit Kamakhya asked me now, in unmistakable terms, to share with him the purpose of my visit, including the tantric initiation I wanted to do. I did as I was told. I only know one adept qualified to give this initiation, he said. He is really old and has not initiated anyone in the past 20 years. I cannot promise that he will initiate you, but you are someone I would definitely vouch for. I followed him through many small and narrow streets, which meandered this way and that, until we arrived at our destination. I was ushered into a little house, where the old tantric, lean and frail, sat on a mat facing the door as if waiting for me. Near him sat a Bhairavi who must have been in her 80s. She was strikingly beautiful and had a glow about her that was hard to ignore. Fair-complexioned, with high cheekbones, there wasn't a single wrinkle on her face except for a few crow's feet, though her hair had turned grey. She knew very little Hindi and no English. Her mother tongue was Assamese. She felt like a mother to me. We offered our obeisances to the great tantric. He looked at me and smiled. "I'll initiate you," he said, even before we had mentioned it. He knew exactly why we were there, but that didn't surprise me. After my vision in the mountains, nothing surprised me anymore. As I was introduced to the Bhairavi, who lived with the tantric, she placed her hand on my head in blessing. The elderly ascetic inquired about my previous tantric initiations and sadhanas. He also wanted to know about my full name prior to renunciation, and about the guru who had given me sannyasa diksha. After I had responded to his questions, he said it wasn't possible to initiate me during the festival as Mother Divine, known as Kamakhya or Kamakshi here, was supposed to be menstruating at this time. Menstruation is a sign that the feminine energy is getting ready to procreate, that it is preparing for evolution. Linked directly to the lunar cycle, those 5 days are most auspicious for aspiring tantrics not only to transform themselves, but to transmute their desires and emotions into transcendental energy, for their spiritual growth as well as for the benefit of humanity. The tantric set the date of 29 June for my initiation. I went to the cremation ground to ascertain the suitability of spending a month there. I also tried to find out about Bhairavi Ma. I shared her description with everyone I met, but no one had heard of her. Even those who were born and raised in Kamakhya, who had lived there for more than 60 years, did not know anything about her. Once again, I wasn't surprised. The cremation ground was quite modernized. It had iron racks upon which they burnt the dead bodies. As soon as the body had finished burning, they would hose down the pyre to save wood. The place turned out to be unsuitable for my month-long sadhana. There were no traditional funeral pyres. It was too close to the main road. There was a busy Shiva temple nearby, and there were plenty of drugged and tipsy sadhus pretending to be genuine tantrics about the place. Thanks to such sadhus, the world has misunderstood Tantra and its essence. It is wrongly assumed that Tantra is about tantric sex, tantric massage, tantric yoga and so on. This is not where Tantra starts or ends. Tantra is an inner journey the practitioner undertakes to break the conditioning of the mind and move beyond the conditioned and egoistic self, so that he may see himself as he truly is. I was absorbed in these thoughts when one of the committee members of the Shiva temple approached me. Upon finding out what I was looking for, he insisted I should stay at their temple for my sadhana. He even promised to make the necessary arrangements. I had a simple way of deciding the spot for my mantra sadhana. Whenever I travelled somewhere, I sensed the place's energies. I always went with my first reading and it never failed me. I did not sense the right energy here and made up my mind to look elsewhere. There was still time before my tantric initiation, so I decided to go to West Bengal, hoping to meet someone there who could talk to me about the sensations I was experiencing. I caught a train to New Jalpaiguri and then a shared taxi to Darjeeling. There I visited 3 monasteries and had quite a revelation. The lamas were so occupied with daily chores, prayer rituals, and the study of Buddhist texts that they had no time for meditation. Despite the fact that a faith is pure, and its teachings and philosophy profound and original, it will turn into a corpse if institutionalized. One is left with a brain-dead patient on life support. The only consolation is that the patient is still breathing. I felt sorry for the Buddha. In one of the monasteries, I met a lama who told me about a senior lama doing rigorous meditation in the mountains. He spoke at length about this monk, who was now more than 70 years old. I was keen to meet him. I mentioned that I was well versed in Mahamudra meditation and had done countless hours of practice in it. "Don't tell him this, he will get very angry with you," he said. "Angry?" "Yes, because you practiced it without any Buddhist lama initiating you." "Angry, did you say?" "Oh yes, he will be really mad." At that moment I decided I didn't want to meet their senior lama. If he hadn't overcome his anger all these years, what could he possibly share with me? What had he done in the past 70 years? What did he meditate on? What did he understand or let go? I quietly introspected on these questions. I was reminded of Naga Baba. Meditation, worship, praying, it's all useless if we are unable to go beyond what holds us back. I went to Gangtok and visited a few more monasteries, but met no one who interested me. I went to the Rumtek monastery, far away from the traffic, noise and people, and met a lama who had spent his life teaching Buddha Dharma. I spoke to him briefly about my journey and recent experiences. He put his hand on my pulse and I shut down the involuntary system of my body. He was greatly moved to feel no pulse. I thought I was about to find out something from him, but he started prostrating before me instead. The young monk who had introduced me to this teacher was present in the room. He was about to follow suit, but I stopped them. He informed me that he had never met anyone who could do that, or sit in one posture for as long as I said I could. He also said that he did not know anyone who claimed to have deep physical sensations all the time. This was a lama who knew Buddhist and Tibetan meditation like the back of his hand. He could perhaps give a far more enlightening and compelling discourse on meditation than I could, but here he was with no experiential understanding. He knew the Tripitaka, the primary texts of the Buddhist canon, by heart. He could expound the Hinayana, Mahayana, Vajrayana vehicles of Buddhism. He was able to talk about sutras and the tantric path, but how far can words take you? I shook my head, thanked him and left. I was back in Kamakhya to meet the tantric yogi on the appointed day. He was doing a kriya when I arrived, and there it was, lying in front of me, the severed head of a goat. It was the first time I had seen a severed goat's head from such close quarters, and it was a strange feeling. It almost seemed alive, its eyes half open and lips slightly parted, exposing some of its small teeth. I felt sorry for the poor animal. Had they tried to slaughter it in my presence, I would have certainly stopped them. "Hold this between your thumb, index and little finger," the tantric said, and handed me a tiny vessel, no more than the size of half a thumb. He poured alcohol into it, made an occult mudra over it and asked me to drink the contents. I'd never had alcohol. Also, I had fasted the day before as it was part of the initiation process, so I was a little concerned because I didn't want to lose my equilibrium. I expressed my reluctance and the tantric said, "It's not alcohol. It's an offering to Mother Divine that been consecrated. Even if you are to have a liter of this, you won't get drunk. And never call this alcohol, for it is one of the Panchamakara ingredients." Panchamakara is a set of 5 ingredients used in tantric rituals, and each of them starts with the letter M. The ingredients can be taken in their original form or substituted, depending on the nature of the sadhana. Along with the alcohol, I was given black oats, parched grain, coconut water and flowers. Finally, I took a sip of the alcohol, just enough to wet my mouth. I knew that this was the first and last time in my life I would have alcohol. In this way, I was initiated. The Bhairavi was wearing red that day. She looked beautiful, adorned with sparkling jewels and a red bindi on her smooth forehead. She had cooked a meal and wanted to feed me, but I was shy and didn't let her. The food was delicious and I savoured it, eating more than usual at her insistence. The couple blessed me before I left. On an impulse, I went to Lava, a place in the eastern Himalayas, and meditated for a month in an isolated little cottage. The sensations, however, did not subside. I was able to read and write now, but not for long. One day I entered into a deep meditation and prayed to Mother Divine for a solution. An inner voice guided me to do a yogic kriya of 40 days. It will help you channelize your energies, the voice said. You must harness the fire breath. The breath of fire, also known as the breath from the solar channel, is the inhalation and exhalation from the right nostril. It significantly raises body heat and therefore is best done in a cold climate. I went back to the northern Himalayas and meditated for the prescribed duration in a tiny hamlet called Rudranath, situated at an altitude of 14,000 feet. Rudranath is open only 6 months in a year because of the extreme weather conditions. I found a small hut in an isolated spot and decided to do my meditation there. Nearby was a beautiful Shiva temple. Though most temples have a Shivalingam, this one had an idol of Lord Shiva, a rarity. I rigorously performed the yogic kriya. Exactly as the voice had predicted, the sadhana helped me harness my energies. The sensations did not decrease or die down though. Instead, they intensified even more but were now concentrated in my forehead. My body no longer trembled and I found it much easier to read, write and walk. A stream of intense joy ran through my body like the Ganga flowing through the Himalayas. When my kriya ended, I trekked down to a town called Gopeshwar and stayed overnight there. It was also time to let my loved ones know that they could see me again. I had promised them in my last email that I would re-establish contact soon after I attained self-realization. It was now time to honor that promise. From my hotel room, I borrowed someone's phone and called my father. "I'm sorry I left you like that." These were the first words that tumbled out of my mouth. I had lost the right or the privilege to call him Dad. "That means you haven't understood me all these years, Swamiji. You went for a good cause and I have already accepted you as my guru. I offer a lamp and incense to your picture every day. You must treat me like any other disciple. You belong to the world now, Swamiji." While I wasn't surprised at his response because he had never interfered in my life, I was amazed by his reverence and acceptance. I wasn't expecting this. Actually, I wasn't expecting anything. I was simply keeping my promise to my family because I loved and cared for them. He handed the phone to my mother, and even though she was trying to sound strong and calm, her voice was choked. I also spoke to Rajan and Didi and told them I would visit them in a couple of weeks. Finally, on 7 October, I visited the place I had once called home. It was here that I wanted to receive alms for the first time. All my close family members were present. In their eyes I saw the pain that my parting had caused them. When someone dies, you can find ways to console yourself, but when someone you love deeply disappears by choice, and you don't know where he is, it is pain of an entirely different kind. Invoking Shiva and Shakti in my parents, I sat them down on a high seat and paid obeisance to them. Every elderly man was my father, every elderly woman my mother. The whole world was my family, but I had no home. I belonged to everyone now, but no one was my own. I loved everyone unconditionally, cared about people and felt their pain equally. I was not the doer now, but a silent observer. I felt like the quiet mountains, giant and still, and the vast sky, clear and endless. When I spoke to my father a little later, this was his first question to me. "What message do you have for us?" I said, "The universe is trillions of years old, our galaxy and planet are billions of years old. The human race is a few million years old, while the average human life is 70 years. It's a very short life. It must be celebrated, it must be lived. Life is not a challenge that needs to be faced, nor is it an enemy that needs to be fought. For that matter, it's not a problem that needs solving either. It's a flowing river and all we need to do is to flow with it. Live, love, laugh, give." I also met my mother privately. After asking me how I was, she said softly, "The prediction has come true, word for word." "What prediction, Ma?" She told me her conversation with the mystic before I was born. "Why didn't you ever tell me this earlier?" I said. "I never wanted to be a hurdle on your path. But somewhere within, I had this hope that if I didn't talk about it, perhaps it wouldn't happen." "Are you sad that I renounced?" "How can I be sad if it makes you happy, Swamiji? Today, I can say to the world that I'm the mother of a saint." Enlightenment does not mean you have to live like a pauper. It does not mean you have to subject yourself to a life of hardship and abstinence. On the contrary, to be enlightened means to live in the light of love, compassion and truthfulness. It means learning to live without reservations and inhibitions. Naga Baba did extreme practices all his life, yet he got furious on a daily basis over trivial matters. I have seen many teachers and sadhus who teach renunciation and detachment, yet are deeply attached to their own ideas, agendas and possessions. I have met young monks from monasteries who visit restaurants and shops, eager to enjoy things they can't afford. Rather than begging or being a poor monk eyeing material comforts, it is far better to live in the world and be detached. Your knowledge of rituals and the scriptures, the time you spend in places of worship, the money you raise for religious causes, such things, I am sorry to tell you, have absolutely no connection with God unless the heart is open to the divine. Such acts will not even lead to an independent way of thinking, let alone enlightenment, unless you understand well that the objective of religious acts is to purify yourself and cultivate compassion and gratitude. The more you get attached to a cause, religious or otherwise, the more you restrict your own freedom. When you launch religious organizations, hopping to gain spiritual merit, not only are you mistaking illusion for reality, but chances are you will increasingly become more rigid. The most inflexible people I have met are generally the most religious. Religion is our creation. It is the middleman who overpromises and underdelivers, and what's more, it rarely connects us to the right supplier. Some scriptures say that this world is an illusion, or that after death there is a heaven and a hell. There may be an underlying substantive reality, the invisible essence in everything visible, but that does not make this world an illusion or unreal. The pleasure you experience during moments of intimacy, the joy you feel when your child smiles, the pleasure you get when you taste success, the high you experience when you attain your goal. These may be temporary, but they are not illusory. The satisfaction and nourishment we get from eating food is a temporary experience too, but we do not stop eating or decide to go in search of a miracle pill, so we never have to eat again. The world may be temporary, but that does not make it unreal. Nothing is absolute or permanent anyway. The reality is that everything in creation is in a state of constant transformation. Everything is interconnected and interdependent. Wisdom speaks only to those who are open to the truth, and insight does not speak at all, it just dawns. So I cannot give you any insight, it must come from within. I can only share my own learning. Krishna, Christ, Buddha and Muhammad shared their knowledge and their truth with the world, but they did not invent the light bulb, create fire or invent tools for agriculture. We owe our gratitude to the minds who gave us these gifts as much as we do to those who have imparted great spiritual truths to us. Are we to say one is better than the other? We need both spirituality and science. We depend on religion and theology because we have lost faith in ourselves and in our fellow humans. As a result, we need external pillars to support ourselves. Self-realization is removing yourself from that support structure. You no longer require the pillars. In fact, you become a pillar of divine love and light. This is a precious life, and all religions, for better or worse, are mere concepts. The sooner you wake up to this reality, the quicker you rise above them. But truth is not a one-size-fits-all. It's a personal matter, a private affair. Einstein found it in a laboratory. Buddha found it under a tree. Edison found it in a light bulb. Socrates exemplified it by drinking hemlock, and Christ exemplified it on the cross. Bill Gates found it in Microsoft, and Steve Jobs found his in Apple. What is your truth? The eternal truth is that you have the right to live your life to the fullest, every moment. This is the least you deserve. The fact that you are breathing and living means nature wants you, life wants you. As long as you have a compassionate view and you are not hurting others, everything, well, almost everything is okay. Listen to your inner voice. This voice is the purest voice you will ever know. Your truth is also the greatest religion, the highest God. A sense of fulfillment comes from walking your own path. For some it may be meditation, for others it may be music, dancing, painting, writing or reading. Find what makes you happy and pursue it. I am not your traditional sadhu or a celibate monk. I am not a ritualistic priest or a rigid preacher either. I just am my own truth, bared before you without any expectations or agenda, free for you to interpret as you like. I invite you to seek your own liberation by finding what matters to you, by living your life to the fullest. Rewrite your rules, redefine yourself. Don't let life slip you by. You are a master of infinite possibilities. I've given you my truth, go discover yours.